Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the incessant beeping of my alarm clock pierced through the veil of sleep, dragging me back to consciousness. I groaned, my hand fumbling in the darkness to silence the irritating device. As my fingers found the switch, I noticed something odd. The texture felt different, unfamiliar. My eyes snapped open and I found myself staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. Panic surged through me as I bolted upright, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't my room. This wasn't my bed. Where the hell was I? The room was dimly lit by the pale glow of early morning light filtering through heavy curtains. It was sparsely furnished, a bed, a nightstand, and a dresser. The walls were a stark white, devoid of any personality. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet touching cold hardwood floors. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding hoarse and unfamiliar to my own ears. "Is anyone there?" Silence was my only answer. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. As I moved, I caught sight of myself in a full-length mirror on the wall. The face staring back at me was my own, but somehow different. My hair was longer, my face more gaunt. I looked older. What the hell is going on? I muttered to myself, running a hand through my hair. I made my way to the window, pulling back the curtains. The view that greeted me was not the familiar cityscape I was used to. Instead, I saw rolling hills covered in lush green forests, a picturesque scene that seemed more at home in a postcard than outside my window. A knock at the door made me jump. "Mr. Collins? Are you awake?" A woman's voice called from the other side. "Mr. Collins?" That wasn't my name. Was it? Yes, I'm awake," I replied hesitantly. The door opened, and a middle-aged woman in a nurse's uniform entered. She smiled warmly at me, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Collins. How are you feeling today?" I stared at her, confusion etched on my face. I don't know. Where am I? Who are you?" The nurse's smile faltered slightly. She approached me slowly, as if afraid I might bolt. "Mr. Collins, my name is Sarah. You're at Pinewood Retreat. Do you remember checking in last week?" I shook my head, my mind reeling. "No, I don't remember anything. What is this place?" Sarah's expression softened. "Pinewood Retreat is a rehabilitation center, Mr. Collins. You came here to recover from your accident." "Accident?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, gesturing for me to sit down on the bed. I complied, feeling suddenly weak. "You were in a car accident 3 months ago, Mr. Collins. You suffered a severe head injury and were in a coma for several weeks. When you woke up, you were experiencing significant memory loss. You've been making progress, but..." She trailed off, her eyes searching my face. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to make sense of her words. "But what?" Sarah sighed. "But it seems you're having another episode of memory loss. This has happened a few times since you've been here. Your memories usually start to come back within a day or two." I buried my face in my hands, trying to process this information. How could I not remember any of this? "What's my first name?" I asked suddenly, looking up at Sarah. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's Daniel. Daniel Collins." The name felt foreign on my tongue as I repeated it. Daniel Collins. Sarah placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I know this is confusing and frightening, Daniel, but we're here to help you. Dr. Reeves will be by later this morning to check on you. In the meantime, would you like to take a walk around the grounds? Sometimes fresh air and a change of scenery can help stimulate memory recall." I nodded numbly, still trying to wrap my head around the situation. Sarah helped me find some clothes. Apparently they were mine, though I didn't recognize them, and led me out of the room. The hallway outside was long and sterile, reminiscent of a hospital. Other patients wandered about, some accompanied by nurses, others on their own. They all seemed to be in various states of lucidity. I wondered if they were all here for similar reasons. As we stepped outside, the crisp morning air hit me like a slap to the face. The scent of pine and damp earth filled my nostrils, grounding me in the present moment. The grounds of Pinewood Retreat were beautiful, manicured lawns, flower gardens, and walking paths that wound through the surrounding forest. "It's beautiful here," I murmured, taking in the scenery. Sarah smiled. "Yes, it is. The peaceful environment is conducive to healing and reflection. Many patients find that spending time in nature helps with their recovery process." As we walked, I tried to jog my memory, searching for any fragment of recollection, but my mind remained frustratingly blank. "Sarah," I said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between us, "can you tell me more about my accident, or my life before?" She looked at me sympathetically. "I'm afraid I don't know many details about your life before the accident, Daniel. That's something you'll need to discuss with Dr. Reeves. As for the accident itself, I know it was a head-on collision. You were driving alone at night and the other driver was intoxicated. You were lucky to survive." I felt a chill run down my spine despite the warm sun on my face. "And the other driver?" Sarah's expression turned grim. "He didn't make it." The weight of that information settled heavily on my shoulders. A man had died, and I had nearly died too. Yet I couldn't remember any of it. As we continued our walk, we came across a small pond. I stopped, staring at my reflection in the still water. The face looking back at me was a stranger's, yet I knew it was mine. "Who am I, Sarah?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who is Daniel Collins?" Sarah stood beside me, her reflection joining mine in the water. "That's what you're here to figure out, Daniel. Your identity isn't just in your memories, it's in your actions, your choices, your relationships. Even if you can't remember who you were, you have the opportunity to decide who you want to be." Her words resonated with me, offering a glimmer of hope in the confusion. As we turned to head back to the main building, I saw a man watching us from a distance. He was tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair and intense blue eyes. When he noticed me looking, he quickly turned and walked away. "Who was that?" I asked Sarah. She followed my gaze, but the man had already disappeared around a corner. "I'm not sure. Probably another patient or a visitor." "Why do you ask?" I shook my head, unable to shake the feeling that the man had been watching me specifically. "No reason. Just curious." Back in my room, Sarah helped me get settled and explained the day's schedule. "Dr. Reeves will be here in about an hour. After your session with him, you have group therapy, then lunch. This afternoon, you can choose between art therapy or physical therapy." I nodded, still feeling overwhelmed but grateful for the structure. As Sarah turned to leave, I called out to her, "Sarah, thank you for everything." She smiled warmly. "You're welcome, Daniel. Remember, we're all here to help you. Don't be afraid to ask questions or seek support. Recovery is a journey, and you don't have to walk it alone." With that, she left, closing the door softly behind her. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind swirling with questions. Who was I really? What kind of life had I led before the accident? And why couldn't I shake the feeling that there was more to my story than a simple car crash? As I waited for Dr. Reeves, I made a silent promise to myself. I would uncover the truth about my past, no matter what it took. Little did I know, the journey to rediscover Daniel Collins would lead me down a path far more twisted and dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, counting down the minutes until my meeting with Dr. Reeves. Each second that passed brought me closer to potential answers, but also to the unknown. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain: my life would never be the same again. The gentle knock on my door jolted me from my thoughts. I'd been staring out the window, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn of Pinewood Retreat. "Come in," I called, my voice steadier than I felt. The door opened, revealing a man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a crisp white coat over a navy blue sweater, and his kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Good morning, Daniel. I'm Dr. Reeves," he said, extending his hand. "How are you feeling today?" I shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip. "Confused," I admitted. "Lost." Dr. Reeves nodded sympathetically. "That's to be expected. Sarah informed me that you're experiencing another episode of memory loss. Let's sit down and talk about it." We settled into 2 comfortable armchairs by the window. Dr. Reeves pulled out a notepad and pen, his eyes never leaving my face. "Tell me, Daniel, what's the last thing you remember before waking up here?" I closed my eyes, trying to grasp at the wisps of memory that danced just out of reach. I'm not sure. Everything before this morning is just blank." Dr. Reeves scribbled something in his notepad. "That's okay. Let's start with what you do know. How do you feel physically?" I took a moment to assess my body. Tired. A bit achy, especially my head. And there's this. I rolled up my sleeve, revealing a long, jagged scar running from my wrist to my elbow. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, examining the scar. "That's from the accident. You had extensive surgery to repair the damage to your arm. Do you remember getting this scar?" I shook my head, tracing the raised line with my finger. "No. It's like it belongs to someone else." "In a way, it does," Dr. Reeves said softly. "The Daniel Collins from before the accident. Our goal here is to help you reconnect with that person, to bridge the gap between who you were and who you are now." I looked up at him, a sudden urgency in my voice. "Who was I, Dr. Reeves? What kind of person was Daniel Collins?" The doctor's expression turned thoughtful. "From what we've gathered from your previous lucid periods and the information provided by your emergency contact, you were a journalist. You worked for a small but respected online news outlet, often covering investigative pieces." A journalist. The word stirred something in me, a faint echo of familiarity. "What kind of stories did I cover?" "You seem to have a particular interest in exposing corruption," Dr. Reeves explained. "Your last piece before the accident was an investigation into a local pharmaceutical company. Do you remember anything about that?" I furrowed my brow, trying to recall, but came up empty. "No, nothing." Dr. Reeves made another note. "That's all right. Memory recovery is a process, Daniel. It takes time and patience." A thought suddenly struck me. "Dr. Reeves, you mentioned an emergency contact. Do I have family? Friends? Why hasn't anyone visited me?" The doctor's expression softened, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Your emergency contact is a colleague, Michael Brennan. He's been keeping tabs on your progress, but..." He hesitated. "But what?" I pressed. Dr. Reeves sighed. "You don't seem to have any close family, Daniel. And from what Mr. Brennan has told us, you kept to yourself mostly. Your work was your life." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. No family, no close friends, just work. What kind of life had I been living? I see," I managed to say, my throat tight. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Daniel, I know this is a lot to process, but I want you to understand something crucial. The gaps in your memory, they're not just empty spaces, they're opportunities. Opportunities to rediscover yourself, to perhaps become a version of Daniel Collins that you always wanted to be." I nodded slowly, trying to absorb his words. "How do we do that?" "We start small," he replied. "We'll continue with your therapy sessions, both individual and group. We'll work on cognitive exercises to stimulate memory recall. And most importantly, we'll focus on the present, on building new experiences and relationships." As Dr. Reeves spoke, a flash of memory hit me, the man I'd seen watching me during my walk with Sarah. "Doctor, there was a man I saw earlier, tall, lean, with intense blue eyes. Do you know who that might be?" Dr. Reeves frowned slightly. "I'm not sure. It could be another patient or a visitor. Did he say anything to you?" I shook my head. "No, he just watched me, then left when he saw me looking." The doctor made a note. I'll look into it. In the meantime, if you see him again and feel uncomfortable, please let a staff member know immediately. Our session continued for another hour, with Dr. Reeves asking me questions about how I was feeling, what I was experiencing. By the end, my head was swimming with information, but I felt a glimmer of hope. As Dr. Reeves stood to leave, he paused at the door. One more thing, Daniel. We found something in your personal effects when you were admitted. I think it might help jog your memory. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. The cover was worn leather, and a pen was tucked into the spine. This was in your jacket pocket when you were brought in, he explained, handing it to me. We didn't open it out of respect for your privacy, but perhaps it contains some clues about your past. I took the notebook, feeling its weight in my hands. Thank you, Doctor. After Dr. Reeves left, I sat on my bed, staring at the notebook. With trembling hands, I opened it. The first page was blank except for a single line written in a hasty scrawl. Trust no one. The truth will set you free. My heart raced as I flipped through the pages. They were filled with notes, names, dates, and cryptic symbols. One name appeared multiple times: Helix Pharmaceuticals. As I read, fragments of memory began to surface. Late nights hunched over a computer, clandestine meetings in dimly lit parking garages, a growing sense of dread as I uncovered something big, something dangerous. My eyes widened as I reached the last written page. There, in red ink, was a hastily scribbled message. They know. Car sabotaged. If you're reading this, don't trust them. Find Michael. He knows. The notebook slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, landing on the floor with a soft thud. The accident. Had it really been an accident? A knock at the door made me jump. Mr. Collins? It was Sarah's voice. It's time for group therapy. I quickly picked up the notebook, shoving it under my mattress. Coming, I called out, my mind reeling. As I followed Sarah down the hallway, my thoughts were in turmoil. Who were they? What had I uncovered? And most importantly, who could I trust? The peaceful facade of Pinewood Retreat suddenly felt sinister. As we entered the group therapy room, I scanned the faces of the other patients, wondering if any of them were more than they appeared. One face stood out, the man with the intense blue eyes. He sat in the corner, watching me with an unreadable expression. Our eyes met, and he gave me a barely perceptible nod. In that moment, I knew one thing for certain. My stay at Pinewood Retreat was going to be anything but peaceful. The Daniel Collins I was before the accident had stumbled onto something big, something worth killing for. And now, it was up to this new amnesiac version of myself to unravel the mystery, before whoever was after me decided to finish the job. As I took my seat in the therapy circle, my mind was already racing, plotting my next move. The journey to rediscover myself had just taken a dangerous turn, and I had a feeling that the road ahead would be far more perilous than I could have ever imagined. The group therapy session was a blur of faces and voices, none of which penetrated the fog of anxiety that had settled over me since discovering the notebook. I sat rigid in my chair, my eyes constantly darting to the man with the intense blue eyes. He remained silent throughout the session, his gaze fixed on the group leader, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was acutely aware of my every move. As the session wound down, the group leader, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Martinez, turned to me. Daniel, would you like to share anything with the group today? I cleared my throat, suddenly aware that all eyes were on me. I'm not sure what to say. Everything feels new and confusing. Dr. Martinez nodded encouragingly. That's perfectly normal, Daniel. Why don't you tell us how you're feeling right now? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like I've stepped into a story halfway through and I don't know the plot or the characters. A murmur of understanding rippled through the group. An elderly woman to my left reached out and patted my hand. We've all felt that way, dear. It gets better. As the session ended and people began to file out, I noticed the blue-eyed man lingering near the door. Our eyes met, and he jerked his head slightly, indicating I should follow him. My heart pounding, I made my way towards him, but before I could reach him, Sarah appeared at my side. "How was the session, Daniel?" she asked, her cheerful voice a stark contrast to the tension I felt. "Fine," I replied distractedly, my eyes still on the man who was now disappearing down the hallway. "Sarah, who is that man? The one with the blue eyes?" Sarah followed my gaze, her brow furrowing slightly. "Oh, that's Mr. Hawthorne. He's been here about as long as you have. Why do you ask?" I shook my head, trying to appear nonchalant. "No reason. Just curious." Sarah gave me a look that suggested she didn't quite believe me but didn't press the issue. "Well, it's time for lunch. Shall we head to the dining hall?" As we walked, my mind raced. Mr. Hawthorne. The name meant nothing to me, but something about him felt significant. I needed to find a way to talk to him alone. The dining hall was a large, airy room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the retreat's expansive grounds. I filled my tray mechanically, barely noticing what I was putting on it. As I scanned the room for a place to sit, I spotted Mr. Hawthorne at a corner table, alone. Taking a deep breath, I made my way over to him. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, those piercing blue eyes seeming to look right through me. After a moment, he nodded, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. I sat down, my heart hammering in my chest. For a few minutes we ate in silence, the clatter of cutlery and the low hum of conversation around us filling the air. Finally, unable to bear the tension any longer, I spoke. "You've been watching me." Mr. Hawthorne paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "You noticed." "Why?" I pressed, leaning forward slightly. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Because you're not supposed to be here, Daniel Collins." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Mr. Hawthorne leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "This place, it's not what you think it is, and you're not just another patient with memory loss." I swallowed hard, the food on my tray suddenly unappetizing. "Who are you? How do you know this?" A sad smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Let's just say I'm a friend. Or at least I was, before." "Before what?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. Mr. Hawthorne's eyes darted around the room again. "Not here. It's not safe. Meet me in the East Garden tonight after lights out. I'll tell you everything I know." Before I could respond, he stood up abruptly, taking his tray. "Be careful who you trust, Daniel. Not everything here is as it seems." With that cryptic warning, he walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. The rest of the day passed in a haze of scheduled activities and therapy sessions. I went through the motions, my mind preoccupied with Mr. Hawthorne's words and the mysterious notebook hidden under my mattress. As night fell and the patients were ushered back to their rooms, I lay in bed, fully clothed, waiting for the right moment. The clock on my bedside table ticked away the minutes agonizingly slowly. Finally, at midnight, I heard the last of the night staff making their rounds. I waited another 15 minutes before slipping out of bed and creeping to my door. The hallway was dimly lit and eerily quiet. I made my way down the corridor, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure someone would hear it. Somehow I managed to navigate through the building and out into the cool night air without being detected. The East Garden was a small, secluded area, hidden from view of the main building by a row of tall hedges. As I approached, I saw a figure standing in the shadows of an old oak tree. "Mr. Hawthorne?" I called softly. The figure stepped forward, and I felt a rush of relief as I recognized the man's lean frame and intense gaze. "You made it," he said, his voice low. "Good. We don't have much time." "Time for what?" I asked. "What's going on here?" Mr. Hawthorne took a deep breath. "Daniel, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound crazy, but I need you to listen and try to keep an open mind." I nodded, bracing myself. Pinewood Retreat isn't just a rehabilitation center, he began. "It's a front for something much bigger, much more sinister. The patients here, we're not all here voluntarily. Some of us are being held against our will." I felt my blood run cold. "What? Why?" "Because we know things," Mr. Hawthorne continued. "Things that powerful people want to keep hidden. Your car accident, Daniel. It wasn't an accident." The words from my notebook flashed through my mind. "Car sabotaged." "You were investigating Helix Pharmaceuticals," Mr. Hawthorne went on. "You uncovered evidence of illegal drug trials, of people dying. You were going to expose them, so they tried to silence you." My head was spinning. But Dr. Reeves, Sarah, they've been helping me." Mr. Hawthorne's expression darkened. "They're part of it, Daniel. The therapy, the medication they give us, it's all designed to keep us confused, to suppress our memories." I shook my head, trying to process this information. "If that's true, then why are you telling me this? Why haven't they suppressed your memories?" A pained look crossed Mr. Hawthorne's face. "Because I was one of them. I worked for Helix. But when I saw what they were doing, I couldn't be part of it anymore. I was going to help you expose them. That's when they brought me here." Suddenly, a beam of light cut through the darkness. "Hey, who's out there?" a gruff voice called out. Mr. Hawthorne's eyes widened in panic. "We're out of time. Daniel, listen to me. Trust your instincts. Keep digging. And whatever you do, don't take the blue pills they give you at night. They're not for anxiety, they're to keep you compliant." Before I could respond, he melted into the shadows, leaving me alone as the beam of light drew closer. "Mr. Collins?" It was one of the night guards. "What are you doing out here?" I blinked in the harsh light, my mind racing. I couldn't sleep. Thought some fresh air might help." The guard lowered his flashlight, his expression a mix of suspicion and concern. "You know you're not supposed to be out here after hours. Come on, let's get you back to your room." As he led me back inside, my mind was reeling from everything Mr. Hawthorne had told me. If what he said was true, then I wasn't just fighting to regain my memories. I was fighting for my freedom, and possibly my life. Back in my room, I pulled out the notebook, reading through it with new eyes. The cryptic notes suddenly took on a sinister meaning. Names of drug trial participants, dates of unexplained deaths, financial transactions that made no sense for a pharmaceutical company. As I flipped through the pages, a small folded piece of paper fell out. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was an address and a single line of text. "If all else fails, go here. MB. MB Michael Brennan, my colleague. The one person outside of Pinewood who might know the truth." As I lay in bed, sleep eluding me, I made a decision. Somehow, some way, I had to get out of Pinewood Retreat. I had to find Michael Brennan. And most importantly, I had to remember who I was and what I had uncovered. Because if Mr. Hawthorne was right, then the Daniel Collins I used to be had stumbled upon something big enough to kill for. And the Daniel Collins I was now? He was going to finish what the old me had started. As the first light of dawn began to creep through my window, I closed my eyes, my resolve hardening. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The morning arrived with a sense of urgency I hadn't felt since waking up in this place. As sunlight crept through my window, I lay still, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, my mind racing. The revelations from Mr. Hawthorne had shattered the fragile sense of security I'd been clinging to. Now every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every smile a potential lie. A soft knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. "Mr. Collins, it's time for your morning medication." It was Sarah's voice, cheerful as always. But now, that cheerfulness felt sinister, a mask hiding darker intentions. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. "Come in," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah entered, her usual warm smile in place. She carried a small paper cup with 2 pills, one white, one blue. The blue pill. Mr. Hawthorne's warning echoed in my mind. Good morning, Daniel, Sarah said, holding out the cup. How did you sleep? I forced a smile, taking the cup from her. Fine, thank you. I pretended to pop both pills into my mouth, then took a swig from the water glass on my nightstand. With a sleight of hand I didn't know I possessed, I managed to slip the blue pill under my tongue. Sarah watched me closely, her smile never wavering. Excellent. Dr. Reeves wants to see you after breakfast. He says you made some good progress yesterday. I nodded, still holding the water in my mouth along with the hidden pill. Sounds good, I managed to mumble. As soon as Sarah left, I spat the blue pill into my hand, flushing it down the toilet. My heart was racing. How long had I been taking these? What had they been doing to my mind? Breakfast was a tense affair. I found myself scrutinizing every face, wondering who else might be a prisoner here, who might be a guard in disguise. Mr. Hawthorne was nowhere to be seen. As I picked at my food, a commotion near the entrance to the dining hall caught my attention. 2 orderlies were restraining a woman who was screaming and thrashing. "You can't keep me here," she shrieked. "I know what you're doing, I remember." I watched, horrified, as they dragged her away, her screams echoing down the corridor. Around me, other patients quickly averted their eyes, as if afraid to acknowledge what they'd seen. "Terrible thing, that," a voice said beside me. I turned to see an elderly man shaking his head sadly. Poor Evelyn. She has these episodes sometimes. Thinks we're all part of some grand conspiracy. I studied the man's face, wondering if he was another unwitting prisoner or part of the deception. "Does that happen often?" I asked carefully. The old man shrugged. "Often enough. But the doctors here, they know what they're doing. They'll calm her down, get her back on her meds. She'll be right as rain in no time." A chill ran down my spine. How many others like Evelyn had tried to speak out, only to be drugged into compliance? After breakfast, I was escorted to Dr. Reeves's office. The doctor greeted me with his usual warm smile, but now I saw it for what it was, a carefully constructed facade. "Good morning, Daniel," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "How are you feeling today?" I settled into the chair, forcing myself to appear calm. "Better, I think. I feel like I'm starting to remember things." Dr. Reeves leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Oh? That's excellent news. What sort of things are you remembering?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Flashes, mostly. I remember working late nights, meeting people in secret. I think I was investigating something important." The doctor's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something, concern, fear, in his eyes. "That's fascinating, Daniel. Your work as a journalist was certainly a big part of your life, but remember, it's important not to force the memories. They'll come back naturally as you heal." I nodded, playing along. "Of course. I was wondering, though, is there any way I could get access to my personal effects, my phone, my laptop? I think they might help jog my memory." Dr. Reeves's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid that's not possible at the moment, Daniel. External stimuli can be overwhelming for patients in your condition. We need to focus on your internal healing first." I felt a surge of frustration, but managed to keep it hidden. "I understand. It's just, I feel so disconnected from my old life." The doctor reached out, patting my hand in what was meant to be a comforting gesture. The touch made my skin crawl. "I know it's difficult, Daniel, but trust in the process. We're here to help you." The rest of the session passed in a haze of pointed questions and vague answers. I tried to glean as much information as I could without revealing how much I already knew, or suspected. As I left Dr. Reeves's office, my mind was whirling. I needed to find a way to contact the outside world, to reach Michael Brennan. But how? The answer came to me during afternoon recreation time. I was in the common room pretending to read a magazine when I overheard 2 orderlies talking. "New shipment coming in tonight," one said. "Boss wants extra security on the loading dock." "Again?" the other replied. That's the third time this month. What are they bringing in that's so important? Hell if I know. Above our pay grade, man. Just do your job and don't ask questions. I felt a surge of adrenaline. A shipment coming in meant delivery trucks. Delivery trucks meant a potential way out. That night, I lay in bed fully clothed, waiting for the right moment. The address from the notebook was burned into my memory. When the clock struck 2 a.m., I slipped out of my room. The corridors were dimly lit and eerily quiet. I made my way towards the back of the building, following signs for the loading dock. As I turned a corner, I nearly collided with Mr. Hawthorne. "Jesus," I hissed, my heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" His blue eyes were wide with urgency. "Looking for you. You need to leave now. They know you're not taking the medication. They're planning to move you to a more secure facility in the morning." I felt a chill run down my spine. "How do you know this?" "No time to explain," he said, grabbing my arm. "Come on. I can get you to the loading dock. There's a truck leaving in 10 minutes. It's your only chance." We moved swiftly through the shadows, every sound making us freeze. As we approached the loading dock, voices drifted towards us. We pressed ourselves against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. "Just some medical supplies," a gruff voice was saying. "Same as always." "Right," another voice replied skeptically. "Medical supplies that need armed guards. Pull the other one, mate." Mr. Hawthorne tugged on my sleeve, pointing to a truck that was being loaded. "That's your ride," he whispered. "When I give the signal, run for it. There's a tarp in the back you can hide under." I nodded, my mouth dry. "What about you?" A sad smile crossed his face. "I'll create a distraction. Don't worry about me. Just find the truth, Daniel. Expose them." Before I could respond, he stepped out into the open. "Hey," he shouted. "What's going on out here?" As the guards turned towards him, Mr. Hawthorne gave me a slight nod. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted for the truck, my heart pounding in my ears. Behind me, I could hear shouts and the sound of a scuffle. I vaulted into the back of the truck, quickly pulling the tarp over myself. Moments later, I felt the vehicle lurch into motion. As the truck drove away from Pinewood Retreat, carrying me towards an uncertain future, I allowed myself a moment of fear. I was on my own now, with no memories, no resources, and powerful enemies hunting me. But I also felt a surge of determination. Whatever the cost, I would uncover the truth. I would expose Helix Pharmaceuticals and the dark secrets of Pinewood Retreat. And somehow, some way, I would reclaim my identity and my life. The truck rumbled on into the night, each mile taking me further from captivity and closer to answers. The game was on, and I was playing for keeps. The rhythmic rumble of the truck's engine and the occasional jolt from the uneven road were my only companions as I lay hidden under the tarp. My heart raced, a mix of adrenaline and fear coursing through my veins. The musty smell of the tarp and the metallic scent of whatever cargo surrounded me filled my nostrils, a constant reminder of my precarious situation. I had no idea how long we'd been driving or where we were headed. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of panic through me, afraid that it might dislodge my hiding spot and reveal me to the driver. But as the minutes ticked by into hours, a new worry began to gnaw at me. Where would I go once this truck stopped? Just as the thought crossed my mind, I felt the vehicle slow and then come to a stop. The engine cut off and I heard the driver's door open and close. Footsteps crunched on gravel, growing fainter. This was my chance. Cautiously, I peeked out from under the tarp. The back of the truck was open to a pre-dawn sky, the faintest hint of light breaking over the horizon. I was in what looked like an industrial area, surrounded by warehouses and parked trucks. In the distance, I could see the driver entering a small office building. Now or never. I scrambled out of the truck, my legs stiff from hours of immobility. As quietly as I could, I made my way between the parked vehicles, constantly looking over my shoulder. When I reached the edge of the lot, I broke into a run, not stopping until I had put several blocks between myself and the truck that had unwittingly carried me to freedom. Finally, gasping for breath, I leaned against the wall of an alley, trying to get my bearings. The street signs meant nothing to me. I had no idea what city I was in or how far I was from Pinewood Retreat. My only clue was the address scrawled in the notebook. 1420 Sycamore Street, the supposed location of Michael Brennan. A rumble from my stomach reminded me that I hadn't eaten since dinner the previous night. I patted my pockets, hoping against hope that I might have some money, but they were empty. I was alone, penniless, and lost in an unknown city. As the sky lightened, early morning commuters began to fill the streets. I tried to blend in, walking purposefully, even though I had no destination in mind. My hospital-issued clothes drew a few curious glances, but in the rush of the morning, most people were too preoccupied with their own lives to pay me much attention. After walking for what felt like hours, I found myself in a bustling downtown area. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries wafted from a small cafe, making my stomach clench painfully. As I stood there, debating whether to risk going inside and begging for food, a voice called out behind me. "Daniel? Daniel Collins, is that you?" I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. A woman in her mid-30s was staring at me, her brow furrowed in concern. She had short, spiky black hair and wore a leather jacket over a faded band t-shirt. I'm not sure," I stammered, taking a step back. "Do I know you?" The woman's frown deepened. "It's me, Zoe. We worked together at the Tribune before you went freelance." "Jesus, Dan, what happened to you? You look like hell." My mind raced. This woman, Zoe, she knew me. She could be my lifeline, or she could be working for the people who had kept me at Pinewood. I had to tread carefully. "Zoe," I said, testing the name. "I'm sorry, I've had an accident. My memory's not what it used to be." Zoe's eyes widened. "An accident? Is that why you disappeared? Everyone's been worried sick. You just dropped off the grid in the middle of that big pharma expose you were working on." The pharma expose. Helix Pharmaceuticals. It all started to click into place. "Zoe, I need your help," I said, lowering my voice and glancing around nervously. "I can't explain everything right now, but I'm in trouble. Big trouble. Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Zoe studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "My apartment's not far from here. Come on." As we walked, Zoe peppered me with questions that I couldn't answer. Where had I been? What happened to my memory? Was I in some kind of witness protection program? I deflected as best I could, promising to explain once we were somewhere safe. Zoe's apartment was a small, cluttered one-bedroom on the third floor of an old brownstone. As soon as we were inside, she locked the door and turned to face me, her arms crossed. "All right, Collins, start talking." I sank onto her worn couch, suddenly exhausted. Where to even begin? I took a deep breath and started from the beginning, waking up in Pinewood Retreat, the gaps in my memory, the mysterious notebook, and my conversation with Mr. Hawthorne. As I spoke, Zoe's expression shifted from skepticism to shock to anger. When I finished, she let out a long, low whistle. "Holy shit, Dan. This is big. Bigger than I think even you realize." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Zoe ran a hand through her spiky hair. "That expose you were working on? It wasn't just about illegal drug trials. You told me, off the record of course, that you had uncovered evidence linking Helix Pharmaceuticals to some seriously shady government contracts. Black ops stuff, mind control experiments, the works." My head spun. "Mind control? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel." "Yeah, well, truth is stranger than fiction," Zoe said grimly. "And if what you're telling me is true, it looks like you got too close to the truth and they tried to shut you up." A chill ran down my spine. "So what do we do now?" Zoe stood up and began pacing. "First things first, we need to get you somewhere safe. They'll be looking for you and it won't take them long to figure out you might come to me." As if on cue, a heavy knock sounded at the door. Zoe and I froze, staring at each other in panic. "Ms. Rodriguez?" a deep voice called out. "This is Agent Becker with the FBI. We need to ask you a few questions about Daniel Collins. Shit, Zoe hissed. She pointed to a window that led to the fire escape. Go now, I'll stall them. I hesitated. Zoe, I can't just leave you to deal with this. She shook her head firmly. You have to. If they catch you here, it's game over for both of us. Go to this address. She scribbled something on a piece of paper and shoved it into my hand. It's a safe house I use for confidential sources. I'll meet you there when I can. The knocking at the door grew more insistent. Ms. Rodriguez, open up or we'll be forced to break down the door. With one last grateful look at Zoe, I climbed out onto the fire escape. As I descended, I could hear Zoe's muffled voice talking to the agents, buying me precious time. My feet hit the alley pavement and I took off running, clutching the piece of paper with the safe house address. My mind was reeling from the new information. Mind control experiments? Government black ops? What had I stumbled into? As I ran through the unfamiliar streets, dodging pedestrians and trying to look inconspicuous, one thought kept repeating in my mind. I had to remember. Whatever I had uncovered before my accident was clearly important enough for powerful people to want me silenced. And now, with Zoe's help, I had a chance to finish what I'd started. I ducked into a crowded subway station, blending in with the morning rush. As I boarded a train heading in what I hoped was the right direction, I allowed myself a moment of grim determination. They had tried to erase me, to rewrite my identity, but they had failed. And now, Daniel Collins, whoever he really was coming for them. The train lurched into motion, carrying me towards an uncertain future. But for the first time since waking up in Pinewood Retreat, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone anymore, and with allies like Zoe, maybe, just maybe, I stood a chance of uncovering the truth and reclaiming my life. As the city flashed by outside the train windows, I closed my eyes, focusing on the fragments of memory that were starting to surface. Whatever came next, I was ready. The hunt for the truth, and for my true self, was on. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a run-down part of town. I stood outside the peeling green door, my hand hovering over the knob, heart pounding. The key Zoe had given me felt heavy in my palm. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, with a musty smell that spoke of long disuse. A thin layer of dust covered most surfaces. I made my way to the living room, where a worn couch faced an ancient TV. A small kitchenette occupied one corner, its counters bare except for a single burner electric stove. As I explored, my eyes fell on a laptop sitting on a desk in the corner. My pulse quickened. Could this be the key to unlocking my past? I booted up the computer, my fingers trembling as I typed in the password Zoe had scribbled on the back of the safe house address. The screen flickered to life, revealing a desktop cluttered with folders. One folder caught my eye immediately. Helix Investigation. I double-clicked it, and a flood of documents appeared. News articles, financial reports, and what looked like internal memos from Helix Pharmaceuticals. My eyes widened as I began to read. Hours passed as I pored over the files. The story that emerged was more terrifying than I could have imagined. Helix wasn't just conducting illegal drug trials. They were developing a new class of psychoactive compounds for the military. Drugs designed to enhance cognitive function, increase aggression, and, most chillingly, allow for subtle mind control. As I read, flashes of memory began to surface. Late nights hunched over this very laptop, clandestine meetings with whistleblowers, the growing sense of dread as I realized the scope of what I had uncovered. A knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. I froze, my heart in my throat. Had they found me already? Dan? It's me. Zoe's voice called softly from the other side. Relief washed over me as I hurried to let her in. Zoe looked exhausted, her spiky hair disheveled and dark circles under her eyes. Are you okay? I asked as she collapsed onto the couch. What happened with the FBI? Zoe ran a hand over her face. They grilled me for hours, Wanted to know everything about your investigation, where you might have gone. I played dumb, told them we hadn't been in touch for months. Do you think they bought it? She shrugged. For now, maybe. But they'll be watching me. I had to take a roundabout way to get here, make sure I wasn't followed. I gestured to the laptop. Zoe, I've been going through the files. It's worse than we thought. Her eyes hardened. Tell me. I spent the next hour briefing her on what I'd discovered. As I spoke, Zoe's expression grew increasingly grim. Jesus, Dan, she breathed when I finished. This is big. Pulitzer big, but also incredibly dangerous. These people, they'll do anything to keep this quiet. I nodded, a chill running down my spine. I know, but we can't let them get away with this. We have to expose them. Zoe was quiet for a long moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Finally, she spoke. We need more evidence, solid, irrefutable proof. And for that, we need to go to the source. You mean, we need to break into Helix Pharmaceuticals? The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Breaking into a high-security pharmaceutical company? It sounded insane, but as I thought about the horrors I'd uncovered, about the lives at stake, I knew we had no choice. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. How do we do it? Zoe's eyes glinted with a mix of excitement and fear. I have some contacts in the hacking community. They might be able to help us get past the security systems, but first we need to scout the place, figure out the layout. As Zoe made some calls, I turned back to the laptop, searching for any information on Helix's security measures. As I scrolled through documents, a file name caught my eye. MB Contingency. My breath caught. MB. Michael Brennan. The colleague Dr. Reeves had mentioned, my emergency contact. I opened the file, and a video began to play. On the screen was a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and intense green eyes. Me, or rather, the me from before. If you're watching this, my past self said, his voice tight with urgency, then something's gone wrong. I've uncovered something big, something that powerful people will kill to keep secret. If I disappear, if anything happens to me, this is what you need to know. For the next 10 minutes, I watched in stunned silence as my past self laid out the entire conspiracy. Names, dates, locations. Everything we needed to bring Helix down. As the video ended, I sat back, my mind reeling. Zoe, who had finished her calls and come to watch over my shoulder, let out a low whistle. Damn, Collins, you always were thorough. I turned to her, a new fire burning in my chest. This changes everything. We don't need to break in. We have all the evidence right here. Zoe shook her head. It's not that simple. This video alone won't be enough. We need corroborating evidence, documents from inside Helix to back up your claims. Otherwise, they'll just paint you as a conspiracy theorist. She was right, of course. But the video had given us something equally valuable. A roadmap. We now knew exactly what to look for when we did break in. As night fell, Zoe and I huddled over the laptop, planning our next move. We would need equipment, fake IDs, a way to bypass Helix's security systems. It would take time to set up, time we might not have. We should split up, I said finally. I'll go to Helix, scout the place out. You work on getting us the equipment we need. Zoe frowned. I don't like the idea of you going alone. What if they recognize you? I gestured to my reflection in the darkened window. With my longer hair and gaunt face, I barely recognized myself. I don't think that'll be a problem. Besides, we don't have a choice. We're running out of time. Reluctantly, Zoe agreed. As I prepared to leave, she grabbed my arm. Dan, be careful. These people, they won't hesitate to silence you permanently if they catch you. I nodded, the weight of our mission settling heavily on my shoulders. I know, but we have to do this. For all the people they've hurt, all the lives they've ruined. We have to stop them. As I stepped out into the cool night air, a sense of purpose filled me. For the first time since waking up in Pinewood Retreat, I felt like myself again. I might not remember everything about my past, but I knew who I was at my core, a seeker of truth, a fighter against injustice. I hailed a taxi, giving the driver an address a few blocks from Helix Pharmaceuticals. As the city lights blurred past the window, I steeled myself for what was to come. Breaking into one of the most secure facilities in the country, facing off against powerful enemies who wanted me silenced. It was madness. But as I thought about the horrors Helix had committed, about the lives at stake, I knew we had no choice. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, we had to expose the truth. The taxi pulled up to my destination, and I stepped out into the night. In the distance, I could see the gleaming towers of Helix Pharmaceuticals, a beacon of progress to the outside world, but a fortress of secrets and lies to those who knew the truth. As I walked towards the compound, my resolve hardened. They had tried to erase me, to rewrite my identity, but they had failed. And now, Daniel Collins, investigative journalist, seeker of truth, was coming for them. The hunt was on, and this time, I wouldn't rest until justice was served. The Helix Pharmaceuticals complex loomed before me, a behemoth of glass and steel that seemed to touch the night sky. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. Security cameras swiveled silently, their unblinking eyes scanning for any sign of intrusion. I crouched in the shadows of a nearby building, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me. One wrong move and I'd be back in a cell. Or worse. My earpiece crackled to life. "You in position, Dan?" Zoe's voice came through, tense but steady. "Yeah," I whispered back. "I'm looking at the main entrance now. Security's tight, just like we expected." "Remember the plan," Zoe said. "We're not going in tonight. This is just reconnaissance. Get as much intel as you can on their security measures, then get out. No heroics." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Got it. I'm moving in." Keeping to the shadows, I made my way closer to the perimeter fence. The chain-link barrier was topped with razor wire, and I could see the faint shimmer of electricity running through it. No way over or through without setting off alarms. I circled the compound, noting camera positions, guard patrols, and potential blind spots. As I rounded the eastern corner, something caught my eye. A service entrance, less heavily guarded than the main gate. "Zoe," I whispered into my comm. "I think I found our way in. There's a service entrance on the east side. Looks like they use it for deliveries." "Good work," she replied. "Can you get closer? See if you can spot any security features we'll need to bypass." I was about to move when a voice called out, freezing me in place. "Hey, you there? This is a restricted area." A beam of light cut through the darkness, and I found myself staring into the face of a security guard, his flashlight trained directly on me. Time seemed to slow down. In that moment, a flood of memories washed over me. Years of investigative work, of thinking on my feet, of talking my way out of tight spots. I raised my hands, adopting a sheepish expression. "Oh man, I'm so sorry," I said, slurring my words slightly. "I think I took a wrong turn. I'm just trying to find my way back to the bus stop." The guard's stern expression softened slightly, but he kept his flashlight on me. "This isn't anywhere near a bus stop, buddy. How'd you end up here?" I laughed, playing up the drunk act. "You know, that's a great question. Last thing I remember, I was at O'Malley's down on 5th, and then, well, here I am. Funny how that happens, right?" The guard sighed, lowering his flashlight. "All right, come on. I'll point you in the right direction. But you can't be wandering around here, understand? This is private property." "Yes, sir," I said, stumbling slightly as I walked towards him. "Thanks so much. You're a real lifesaver." As the guard led me away from the compound, I made sure to keep up the drunk act, all while memorizing every detail I could about the security setup. By the time he pointed me towards the nearest bus stop, I had a mental map of the entire eastern perimeter. "Take care now," The guard called as I wandered off, still playing the part of the lost drunk. And maybe ease up on the booze next time. I waited until I was well out of sight before dropping the act. My heart was still racing from the close call. "Zoe," I whispered into my comm. "You get all that?" "Every word," she replied, relief evident in her voice. "Quick thinking, Collins. I thought we were blown for sure." I made my way back to our rendezvous point, a 24-hour diner a few blocks away. Zoe was waiting in a booth, a cup of coffee cooling in front of her. Her eyes widened as I slid in across from her. "Jesus, Dan, you look like you've seen a ghost." I ran a hand through my hair, suddenly aware of how close we'd come to disaster. "Feel like I have. But I got what we needed. I know how we're getting in." Over the next hour, fueled by bad coffee and adrenaline, we pieced together our plan. The service entrance would be our way in, but we'd need to bypass the electronic lock and disable the cameras. Zoe's hacker contacts had come through with some high-tech gadgets that should do the trick. "Once we're inside," I said, lowering my voice as a waitress passed by, "we'll need to find the main research lab. That's where they'll keep the most sensitive data." Zoe nodded, her expression grim. "And that's where the security will be tightest. We'll need to move fast. Get in, get the data, and get out before anyone realizes we're there." As we finalized the details, a nagging doubt gnawed at me. "Zoe," I said, meeting her eyes, "are you sure you want to do this? If we get caught—" She cut me off with a sharp look. "Don't even start, Collins. I'm in this as deep as you are. Besides," she added with a grim smile, "someone's got to keep your amnesiac ass out of trouble." I couldn't help but chuckle, grateful for her unwavering support. "All right then. We do this tomorrow night. No turning back now." As we left the diner, the first light of dawn was starting to break over the city. We walked in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. "Dan," Zoe said suddenly, stopping in her tracks, "there's something I need to tell you about before your accident." I turned to face her, a knot forming in my stomach. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, not quite meeting my eyes. "We were more than just colleagues. We were together. Had been for almost a year when you disappeared." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, searching her face for any hint of familiarity, any spark of the connection she was describing. But there was nothing. "I'm sorry," I said softly. I can't remember." Zoe nodded, a sad smile on her face. "I know. I needed you to know, before we do this. In case." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. We both knew the risks we were taking. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. It felt right somehow, even if I couldn't remember our shared past. "Thank you for telling me, and Zoe. No matter what happens, I'm glad you're here with me." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Always, Collins. Now come on, we've got a big day ahead of us." As we walked back to the safe house, my mind was reeling, not just from Zoe's revelation, but from everything that had led us to this point. In the span of a few days, I'd gone from a confused amnesiac in a psychiatric facility to a man on a mission, about to break into one of the most secure buildings in the city. But as I thought about the horrors Helix had committed, about the lives at stake, I knew we had no choice. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, we had to expose the truth. Back at the safe house, we spent the day preparing. We went over the plan again and again, memorizing every detail. Zoe worked on bypassing Helix's digital security while I familiarized myself with the layout of the building. As night fell, we dressed in dark clothes and packed our gear. Standing by the door, ready to embark on our mission, I turned to Zoe. "Ready?" I asked. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Ready. Let's go make history, Collins." As we stepped out into the night, I felt a surge of purpose. Whatever happened next, we were in this together. And together, we would bring Helix Pharmaceuticals to its knees. The final act was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But I was ready. We both were. It was time to reclaim my past and secure a future free from Helix's insidious influence. With one last shared look of determination, we set off into the night, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The night air was crisp and charged with tension as Zoe and I approached the Helix Pharmaceuticals complex. Our footsteps were muffled by the soft grass as we made our way to the service entrance I had scouted earlier. The looming building seemed even more imposing now, its windows dark except for the occasional flicker of a security light. "Remember," Zoe whispered as we crouched behind a hedge near the entrance. "We have a 15-minute window between guard rotations. Once we're in, we move fast." I nodded, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give us away. "Got it. You ready with the tech?" Zoe pulled out a small device no bigger than a smartphone. "Ready? This should disable the electronic lock and loop the camera feed, but we'll only have a few minutes before the system resets." We waited, breath held as a guard passed by on his routine check. As soon as he turned the corner, we sprang into action. Zoe pressed the device against the keypad by the door, and for a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft beep, the light turned green. "We're in," Zoe breathed, a mix of relief and tension in her voice. We slipped inside, the door closing silently behind us. The service corridor was dimly lit and smelled of industrial cleaner. Our shoes squeaked softly on the polished floor as we made our way deeper into the building. "The research lab should be on the 3rd floor," I whispered, recalling the building plans we had studied. "There's an emergency stairwell at the end of this hallway." As we approached the stairwell, a voice echoed from around the corner. We froze, pressing ourselves against the wall. "Yeah, I'm telling you, Mark," a man was saying, his voice growing louder as he approached. "Something weird is going on with Project Mnemosyne. The higher-ups are acting all hush-hush about it." Another voice responded, "You're paranoid, Dave. It's probably just another failed trial." Zoe and I exchanged a look. Project Mnemosyne, that had to be the mind control drug we were investigating. As the voices grew closer, we realized we were trapped. There was nowhere to hide in the bare hallway. Just as panic began to set in, Zoe's eyes lit up. She grabbed my arm and pulled me towards a nearby door marked Janitorial. We slipped inside just as the two men rounded the corner. The closet was tiny and dark, crammed with cleaning supplies. Zoe and I stood pressed together, hardly daring to breathe as the footsteps passed by our hiding spot. "That was close," I whispered once the coast was clear. Zoe nodded, her face inches from mine in the cramped space. For a moment I was acutely aware of her proximity, of the faint scent of her shampoo. A flash of memory hit me. Zoe and I, laughing over takeout in my old apartment, her head on my shoulder as we watched a movie. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. "Dan?" Zoe's voice snapped me back to the present. "You okay?" I shook my head to clear it. "Yeah, sorry, just remembered something." A mix of emotions crossed her face. Hope, sadness, determination. "We can talk about it later. Right now we need to move." We slipped out of the closet and made our way to the stairwell. As we climbed, the sterile smell of the research floors grew stronger. When we reached the 3rd floor, Zoe used her device to bypass the security lock on the door. The research lab was a vast space filled with gleaming equipment and rows of computers. The only light came from the soft glow of monitors and the emergency exit signs. "Okay," Zoe said, moving to the nearest computer terminal. "I'll start downloading the data. You keep watch and see if you can find any physical evidence, documents, samples, anything that can corroborate what's on these servers." I nodded, moving deeper into the lab. As I searched, more flashes of memory surfaced. Clandestine meetings with whistleblowers, late nights poring over leaked documents. It was like putting together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. As I rifled through a filing cabinet, a folder caught my eye. Project Mnemosyne, Phase 3 Trials. My hands shook as I opened it, revealing pages of data and charts. But it was the photos clipped to the back that made my blood run cold. Subjects with vacant eyes, their faces contorted in pain or fear. "Zoe," I called softly. "I think I found something." She looked up from the computer, her face pale in the dim light. "Me too. Dan, this is worse than we thought. They're not just developing mind control drugs. They're testing them on unwitting subjects. Homeless people, addicts, anyone they can get their hands on without raising suspicion." A chill ran down my spine. "We need to get this information out now. How much longer do you need?" Zoe glanced at her screen. "Another 5 minutes to finish the download, then we can..." She was cut off by the sound of an alarm blaring through the building. Red emergency lights began to flash, bathing the lab in an eerie glow. "Shit," Zoe hissed, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "They must have detected the intrusion. We need to go now." I shoved the folder into my bag as Zoe disconnected her device. We ran for the exit, but as we reached the stairwell, we heard footsteps pounding up from below. "This way," I said, pulling Zoe towards the elevator. It was a risk, but our only option. As we rode down, pressed against the back wall of the elevator, the reality of our situation hit me. We were trapped in a hostile building, alarms blaring, with evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful corporations in the world. The elevator dinged as we reached the ground floor. As the doors slid open, we found ourselves face to face with a group of armed security guards. "Freeze!" one of them shouted, raising his weapon. Time seemed to slow down. In that moment, another memory surfaced, a self-defense class I had taken years ago. Without thinking, I moved. I grabbed the arm of the nearest guard, using his momentum to throw him off balance. In the confusion, Zoe darted past, delivering a swift kick to another guard's knee. We ran, adrenaline pumping through our veins. Behind us, I could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. We burst through the main doors into the cool night air. "The car's 2 blocks east," Zoe gasped as we sprinted across the lawn. "If we can make it..." Her words were cut off by the crack of a gunshot. I felt a searing pain in my left arm, but kept running. We couldn't stop now. As we reached the street, headlights suddenly illuminated us. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought we were done for. Then I recognized the driver. It was Michael Brennan, my old colleague. "Get in," he shouted, throwing open the passenger door. We didn't hesitate. As soon as we were inside, Michael floored it, tires screeching as we sped away from Helix Pharmaceuticals. "How did you know?" I asked, wincing as I examined the graze on my arm. Michael's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "I've been keeping tabs on you since you disappeared, Dan. When I saw activity on one of our old secure channels, I knew you were back in the game. Figured you might need an exit strategy." As we sped through the night, putting distance between us and Helix, the reality of what we'd done began to sink in. We had the evidence. We had the truth. But our fight was far from over. Zoe placed her hand over mine, her touch grounding me. "We did it, Dan. Now we just need to get this information to the right people." I nodded, my mind already racing with next steps. We'd struck a blow against Helix, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. The real battle was just beginning. As the city lights blurred past the windows, I felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. My memories were still fragmented, my past still a mystery in many ways. But I knew who I was at my core, a seeker of truth, a fighter against injustice. And with Zoe and Michael by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. The night stretched out before us, full of danger and possibility. We had taken the first step towards exposing Helix's crimes. Now, we just had to stay alive long enough to finish what we'd started. The safe house Michael brought us to was a nondescript apartment in a quiet suburb, far from the chaos we'd left behind. As soon as we were inside, Zoe began setting up her laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she worked to secure our stolen data. Michael paced the small living room, occasionally peeking through the blinds. "We need to move fast," he said, his voice tense. Once Helix realizes what we've taken, they'll come at us with everything they've got. I winced as I cleaned the graze on my arm, the adrenaline wearing off and the pain setting in. We need to get this information to the authorities. The FBI, the DOJ, someone who can't be bought off. Zoe looked up from her computer, her face pale in the glow of the screen. It's not that simple, Dan. The data we stole, it implicates more than just Helix. There are government officials involved, military contracts. This goes all the way to the top. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications of her words sank in. We weren't just up against a corrupt corporation. We were facing off against a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. Michael ran a hand through his graying hair. We need to go public. It's the only way to ensure our safety and get this information out. How? I asked. Every major news outlet will be too scared to touch this without ironclad proof, and we can't risk sending the data electronically. Zoe's eyes lit up. I have an idea. Remember Janet Chen? She runs that independent news blog, the one that broke the story on the senator's offshore accounts last year. I nodded slowly, another piece of my past clicking into place. Yeah, I remember. We worked with her on a story about pharmaceutical price gouging a couple of years ago. Exactly, Zoe said, already typing furiously. She's got a reputation for fearless reporting, and she's got safeguards in place to protect her sources. If we can get the data to her, it could work, Michael mused. But we'd need to meet her in person. It's too risky to send this electronically. I stood up, wincing slightly. Then that's what we'll do. Zoe, can you set up a meeting? She nodded, already reaching for her secure phone. On it. As Zoe made the call, I stepped into the small kitchen, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. The events of the past few days swirled in my mind, waking up in Pinewood, the escape, the break-in at Helix. It felt like a lifetime had passed since I'd opened my eyes in that sterile room, confused and alone. A hand on my shoulder startled me from my reverie. I turned to find Michael standing there, concern etched on his weathered face. "How you holding up, kid?" he asked softly. I let out a shaky breath. I'm not sure. It's all so overwhelming. I feel like I'm living someone else's life, fighting someone else's battle. Michael's grip on my shoulder tightened. Listen to me, Dan. You might not remember everything, but you're still you. The man who uncovered this conspiracy, who was willing to risk everything to expose the truth. That's who you are at your core. Memory or no memory, that hasn't changed. His words struck a chord deep within me, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this man who had been my mentor and friend, even if I couldn't remember all of our shared history. Thanks, Michael, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He nodded, then his expression turned serious. There's something else you should know. About why they targeted you specifically. My pulse quickened. What is it? Michael glanced towards the living room, ensuring Zoe was still occupied with her call. Your father. He was involved in the early stages of Project Mnemosyne. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My father? But I don't even remember him. He died when you were young, Michael explained gently. Car accident. At least that's what they told everyone. But you never believed it. It's why you became a journalist. Why you've always been drawn to exposing conspiracies and corruption. Deep down, I think you've always been searching for the truth about what happened to him. I leaned against the counter, my mind reeling. So when I started investigating Helix, you were getting too close to a truth they've been burying for decades, Michael finished. That's why they were so desperate to silence you, to erase your memories. You were unraveling a conspiracy that went back to your own childhood. The pieces were starting to fall into place. My drive to uncover the truth, the depths of Helix's desperation to keep me quiet. It wasn't just about protecting their current projects. It was about keeping decades of secrets buried. Our conversation was interrupted by Zoe's entrance. It's set, she announced. Janet agreed to meet us tomorrow morning at a cafe downtown. She's taking a huge risk for us. I nodded, pushing aside the turmoil of emotions Michael's revelation had stirred up. Then we better make sure it's worth it. Let's go over everything we have. Make sure we're not missing anything. The next few hours were a blur of activity. We pored over the stolen data, piecing together the full scope of Helix's operations. The more we uncovered, the more horrified I became. It wasn't just mind control drugs. There were experiments in memory manipulation, behavior modification, even attempts at creating super soldiers. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the apartment windows, we finally felt ready. We had organized the data, prepared our statement, and mapped out every detail of Project Namazan we could find. "We should try to get some rest," Zoe said, stifling a yawn. "We need to be sharp for the meeting with Janet." I nodded, though I doubted sleep would come easily. As Zoe and Michael settled in, I found myself drawn to the window looking out at the city slowly coming to life. Somewhere out there, Helix was scrambling to contain the breach, to hunt us down before we could expose their crimes. We were in a race against time, with the fate of countless lives hanging in the balance. As I stood there, watching the sun rise over the skyline, another memory surfaced. A conversation with my mother, years ago, when I'd first told her I wanted to be a journalist. "It's a dangerous path, Daniel," she had said, her eyes filled with a mix of pride and worry. "But if anyone can handle it, it's you. You've got your father's spirit, always seeking the truth no matter the cost." In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about reclaiming my memories or exposing a corrupt corporation. It was about honoring my father's legacy, about finishing the fight he had started all those years ago. I turned back to the room, where Zoe and Michael had fallen into an uneasy sleep. These people had risked everything to help me, to stand by me even when I couldn't remember our shared past. Together, we had uncovered a truth that could change the world. Now, we just had to live long enough to share it. As I finally lay down to rest, my mind was filled not with fear but with determination. Tomorrow we would take our stand. We would shine a light on the darkness that Helix had cultivated for so long. And no matter what came next, I knew one thing for certain. Daniel Collins was back, and he was ready to finish what he'd started. The morning sun cast long shadows across the city as we made our way to the meeting point. The cafe Janet had chosen was a small, unassuming place tucked away on a quiet street corner. As we approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Eyes open," Michael murmured, his gaze sweeping the area. "If Helix has caught up to us, this is where they'll make their move." Zoe squeezed my hand, her touch grounding me. Her touch. "We've come too far to fail now," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her eyes. We entered the cafe, the bell above the door chiming softly. The place was nearly empty, save for a barista behind the counter and a woman sitting alone in the corner, her face hidden behind a laptop screen. As we approached, she looked up, and I recognized her immediately. Janet Chen, investigative journalist and thorn in the side of corrupt officials everywhere. Her sharp eyes took us in, lingering on the barely concealed bulge of Michael's shoulder holster. "You look like hell, Collins," she said by way of greeting, gesturing for us to sit. "I assume you've brought me something good to warrant all this cloak and dagger nonsense?" I slid into the booth across from her, Zoe and Michael flanking me. "Janet, what we're about to show you, it's bigger than anything we've ever worked on before. This could change everything." Janet's eyebrow arched. "That's quite a claim. Let's see what you've got." Zoe pulled out a laptop and a series of encrypted hard drives. As she began to lay out the evidence we'd gathered, Janet's expression shifted from skepticism to shock and finally to a grim determination. "My God," she breathed, poring over the documents. "Mind control experiments, illegal human trials, government collusion. This is the story of the century," Michael finished for her. "But it's also incredibly dangerous. Helix will do anything to keep this quiet." Janet nodded, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she took notes. "I have sources that can corroborate some of this. Whispers of black budget projects, unexplained disappearances, but nothing concrete until now. As Janet dug deeper into the files, a commotion outside caught my attention. A black SUV had pulled up across the street, and men in suits were piling out. "We've got company," I hissed, my heart rate spiking. "Helix found us." Michael was on his feet in an instant, his hand going to his concealed weapon. "Janet, take the drives and go. There's a back exit through the kitchen. We'll hold them off." Janet hesitated for only a moment before gathering the equipment. "I'll need 24 hours to verify everything and prepare the story. After that, it goes live, come hell or high water." "Be careful," Zoe warned. "Once you publish, they'll come for you too." Janet's eyes flashed with determination. "Let them try. I didn't get into this business to play it safe." With that, she disappeared into the back of the cafe. The bell above the door chimed again as the Helix agents entered. I recognized one of them, Dr. Reeves from Pinewood Retreat, his kindly demeanor replaced by cold determination. "Mr. Collins," he called out, his voice carrying across the now empty cafe. "I think it's time we had a chat, don't you?" I stood slowly, positioning myself between the agents and the door Janet had used to escape. "I think we're done chatting, Dr. Reeves. Or should I call you by your real name? Dr. Alan Forsyth, lead researcher on Project Nemazin." A flicker of surprise crossed Reeves's face before he schooled his features. "I see your memory is returning. All the more reason for you to come with us quietly. We can help you, Daniel. Make sense of all these confusing fragments." "Help me?" I scoffed, anger rising in my chest. "Like you helped all those innocent people you experimented on? Like you helped my father before you had him killed?" Reeves' expression hardened. "Your father made his choice, Daniel. Just as you're making yours now. Don't throw your life away for some misguided crusade." "It's not misguided if it's the truth," Zoe interjected, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. Reeves sighed, a look of genuine regret crossing his face. "I had hoped we could resolve this peacefully, but you leave me no choice." He nodded to his men, who began to advance. Michael moved first, drawing his weapon. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he warned. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, in a blur of motion, chaos erupted. Michael fired a warning shot into the ceiling as Zoe and I overturned tables for cover. The Helix agents drew their own weapons, and suddenly the air was filled with the deafening sound of gunfire. Glass shattered as bullets flew, and I could hear screams from the street outside. In the confusion, I lost sight of Zoe. "Zoe!" I called out, panic rising in my throat. "I'm okay," her voice came from behind the counter. "We need to get out of here." I looked around frantically, trying to find an escape route. That's when I saw it, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. Without hesitation, I made a dash for it, bullets whizzing past my head. I grabbed the extinguisher and turned, aiming it at the Helix agents. The white foam blasted out, obscuring their vision and giving us the opening we needed. "Now!" I shouted. "Run!" We bolted for the kitchen, Michael providing covering fire as we went. As we burst through the back door into an alley, I heard Reeves shouting behind us. "This isn't over, Collins. We'll find you." We ran, our feet pounding on the pavement as we weaved through back alleys and side streets. My lungs burned, and the graze on my arm from the previous night throbbed with each step. But I didn't dare slow down. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, we finally stopped, ducking into an abandoned building to catch our breath. Is everyone okay?" I gasped, looking at Zoe and Michael. They nodded, both looking as winded and shaken as I felt. "What now?" Zoe asked, leaning against a wall for support. Michael checked his watch. "We've got 23 hours until Janet publishes the story. We need to stay hidden until then." I nodded, my mind racing. "I think I know a place, an old safe house I set up years ago. If I'm remembering correctly, no one else knows about it." As we prepared to move again, I was struck by a sudden realization. The firefight in the cafe, our desperate escape. It had all felt familiar, not just because of my returning memories, but because of who I was at my core. The Daniel Collins who had uncovered this conspiracy in the first place was still here, still fighting. "Hey," Zoe said softly, placing a hand on my arm. "You with us?" I looked at her, then at Michael, feeling a surge of gratitude for these people who had stood by me through everything. "Yeah," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm with you. Let's finish this." As we slipped out of the building and back onto the streets, I knew the next 23 hours would be the most dangerous of our lives. Helix would be pulling out all the stops to find us, to silence us before the truth could come out. But we had come too far to give up now. We had the truth on our side, and soon, the whole world would know it too. The final countdown had begun. In less than a day, everything would change, and I was ready to face whatever came next, memories or no memories, because some truths are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As we disappeared into the bustling city, I felt a sense of grim determination settle over me. The end game was approaching, and one way or another, this fight would soon be over. The incessant beeping of my alarm clock pierced through the veil of sleep, dragging me back to consciousness. I groaned, fumbling blindly for the source of the noise, my hand eventually finding the cold plastic of the clock. Silence fell, but the damage was done. Another day had begun. I forced my eyes open, squinting against the harsh sunlight streaming through the gaps in my curtains. My bedroom came into focus slowly, clothes strewn across the floor, a half-empty coffee mug on the nightstand, and the ever-present stack of unpaid bills on my desk. Welcome to adulthood, I thought bitterly. With a heavy sigh, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet touching the cold hardwood floor. The chill sent a shiver up my spine, a stark reminder that autumn was in full swing. I stood up, stretching my arms above my head and feeling the satisfying pop of my joints. Another day, another dollar, I muttered to myself, padding across the room to the bathroom. The face that greeted me in the mirror was a far cry from the bright-eyed, ambitious college graduate I'd been just a year ago. Dark circles under my eyes, a 5 o'clock shadow, and a general air of exhaustion, the telltale signs of a soul-crushing office job. As I went through the motions of my morning routine, shower, shave, brush teeth, my mind wandered to the day ahead. Another 8 hours of mindless data entry, fake smiles, and office politics. The thought alone was enough to make me want to crawl back into bed. But bills needed to be paid, and dreams of becoming a writer wouldn't fund themselves. So I donned my corporate armor, a crisp white shirt, navy tie, and charcoal suit. The transformation was complete, from disillusioned dreamer to corporate drone. I grabbed my keys and phone, heading out the door of my small apartment. The autumn air hit me like a slap to the face, crisp and invigorating. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe it in, to feel alive before the numbing effects of the workday set in. The streets were already bustling with activity. People hurried along the sidewalks, clutching coffee cups like lifelines, their faces set in grim determination. I fell into step with them, just another face in the crowd. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out, seeing a text from my best friend Alex. "Hey man, drinks tonight? Need to talk." I frowned, typing out a quick reply. "Sure, everything okay?" The response came almost immediately. "Not really. Tell you later." My frown deepened. Alex wasn't one for dramatics. If he said something was wrong, it probably was. The seed of worry planted itself in my mind, threatening to grow throughout the day. Lost in thought, I almost missed my bus. I sprinted the last few yards, managing to slip through the doors just before they closed. The driver shot me an annoyed look, which I ignored as I swiped my pass and found a seat. The bus ride was a blur of familiar sights. The same shops, the same streets, the same people. It was amazing how a city so vast could feel so small when you traveled the same route day after day. As we neared the business district, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from my boss. Team meeting at 9 a.m. Be prepared to discuss your progress on the Henderson account. I cursed under my breath. The Henderson account, the bane of my existence for the past month. A complex data migration project that was way over my head but somehow had become my responsibility. I'd been struggling with it, and I knew my boss was losing patience. The bus came to a stop in front of a towering glass and steel structure, my workplace. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the day ahead. As I walked through the revolving doors, the cool air conditioning hit me, along with the familiar scent of coffee and printer toner. "Morning, Jake," called out Sarah, the receptionist, as I passed her desk. I managed a smile. "Morning, Sarah. How's it going?" "Oh, you know, another day in paradise," she replied with a wink. If only she knew how much I agreed with the sarcasm in her voice. I made my way to the elevator, joining a group of similarly dressed individuals. We all stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact as the elevator ascended. Floor by floor, people filtered out until I was alone, heading to the 20th floor. The marketing department was already abuzz with activity when I arrived. I navigated through the maze of cubicles to my own little slice of corporate hell, nodding greetings to coworkers as I passed. "Jake!" a voice called out just as I was about to sit down. I turned to see Mike, my cubicle neighbor and the closest thing I had to a friend in this place. "Did you hear about the meeting?" I nodded, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. "Yeah, just got the email. Any idea what it's about?" Mike leaned in, lowering his voice. "Word is, there might be layoffs coming, the Henderson account isn't going well, and the higher-ups are getting antsy." The knot in my stomach turned into a full-blown pit. Layoffs. The word echoed in my mind, bringing with it images of unpaid bills and dwindling savings. "Thanks for the heads up," I managed to say, my mouth suddenly dry. Mike nodded sympathetically before returning to his desk. I sat down heavily in my chair, my mind racing. If there were layoffs coming, I'd be an easy target. New guy, struggling with a major account. I might as well have a bullseye on my back. I booted up my computer, trying to focus on the task at hand. The Henderson account data filled my screen, rows and columns of numbers that seemed to blur together. I had less than an hour to make sense of it all before the meeting. Time seemed to speed up and slow down simultaneously. Before I knew it, it was 8:55, and people were starting to file into the conference room. I gathered my notes and followed, my heart pounding in my chest. Our boss, Mr. Thompson, was already there, his face unreadable as he watched us take our seats. Once everyone was settled, he cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice grave. "As you may have heard, we're facing some challenges with the Henderson account." A ripple of unease went through the room. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, knowing I was the one primarily responsible for the account. "Jake," Mr. Thompson said, turning to me, "can you give us an update on your progress?" All eyes were on me now. I swallowed hard, willing my voice not to shake. "Well, sir, I've been working through the data migration issues. It's been challenging, but I believe I'm close to a breakthrough." Mr. Thompson's eyebrow raised slightly. "Close to a breakthrough? Jake, we needed this done last week. The client is getting impatient." I felt my face flush with embarrassment and fear. "I understand, sir. I just need a little more time." "Time is something we don't have." Mr. Thompson cut me off. He looked around the room, his gaze stern. "I won't sugarcoat this. If we lose the Henderson account, there will be consequences. We can't afford to carry dead weight." The implication was clear. My job was on the line. As Mr. Thompson continued to speak about targets and expectations, my mind was elsewhere. I thought about my dreams of being a writer, now seeming further away than ever. I thought about Alex and whatever trouble he was in. I thought about the stack of bills waiting for me at home. The meeting ended, but I barely noticed. As everyone filed out, Mr. Thompson called out to me. "Jake, a word, please." I stayed behind, my heart in my throat. This was it. I was about to be fired. I was sure of it. Mr. Thompson closed the door and turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Jake, I know you're trying, but this account is make or break for us. I'm giving you until the end of the week to sort it out. If you can't, well, we'll have to reconsider your position here. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That's all, he said, dismissing me. I walked out of the conference room in a daze, barely aware of my surroundings. My mind was a whirlwind of fear, anxiety, and determination. I had until the end of the week to save my job, to prove my worth. As I sat back down at my desk, I made a decision. No more playing it safe. No more following the rule book. If I was going to solve this problem, I needed to think outside the box. I cracked my knuckles and started typing furiously. Ideas began to flow, unconventional solutions that just might work. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement, of challenge. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The Henderson account was about to take me on a journey that would change my life forever. But for now, all that mattered was the task at hand. I had a job to save, and I was ready to fight for it. As the day wore on and the office slowly emptied, I remained at my desk, fueled by determination and copious amounts of coffee. The world outside faded away. My entire focus narrowed to the glowing screen in front of me. I was on the verge of something. I could feel it. All I needed was time. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting an eerie glow over the now empty office. I blinked, realizing I'd lost track of time. A quick glance at my watch confirmed my suspicion. It was well past midnight. The Henderson account data still glared at me from my computer screen, a jumbled mess of numbers and codes that seemed to mock my efforts. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my tired eyes. Come on, Jake, I muttered to myself. Think. There's got to be a solution here. Just as I was about to dive back into the data, a voice startled me. You're here late. I spun around to see a woman standing at the entrance of my cubicle. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with salt and pepper hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her sharp eyes studied me from behind stylish glasses. Yeah, I stammered, caught off guard. Just trying to make some headway on this project. She nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. The Henderson account, I presume? I frowned, wondering how she knew. Yes, actually. I'm sorry, but who are you? A small smile played on her lips. Margaret Chen. I'm the night janitor. Oh, I said, feeling a bit foolish. Nice to meet you, Margaret. I'm Jake. I know who you are, Jake, she said, her tone matter of fact. I've been cleaning this office for 20 years. I know everyone, even if they don't know me. There was something about her demeanor that intrigued me. She didn't speak like a typical janitor. There was an air of authority, of hidden knowledge. 20 years? I whistled. You must have seen a lot of changes around here. Margaret's eyes twinkled. More than you can imagine, but some things never change, like young hotshots working themselves to the bone over impossible projects. I couldn't help but chuckle. That obvious, huh? Like a neon sign, she replied. Then, to my surprise, she pulled up a chair and sat down. So, tell me about this Henderson account that's giving you so much trouble. For a moment, I hesitated. Discussing confidential work with the cleaning staff probably wasn't the best idea, but something in Margaret's eyes made me trust her. Plus, I was desperate for any input at this point. It's a data migration project, I began, turning my screen so she could see. We're trying to transfer all of Henderson's old system data into our new platform, but the formats are incompatible. I've tried every conversion method I know, but nothing seems to work. Margaret leaned in, her eyes scanning the screen with surprising intensity. Have you considered that the problem might not be in the conversion, but in the data itself? I blinked, caught off guard by her insightful question. What do you mean? She pointed to a section of the data. Look here. These entries don't follow the same pattern as the rest. It's subtle, but it's there, almost as if they were entered manually. I finished, the realization dawning on me. Of course, if someone was inputting data by hand, they might have used inconsistent formatting. Margaret nodded, a satisfied smile on her face. Exactly. You're not dealing with one uniform data set. You're dealing with multiple data sets cobbled together. I stared at her, amazed. How did you spot that so quickly? And how do you know so much about data migration? She leaned back, a mischievous glint in her eye. Let's just say I wasn't always a janitor. In another life, I was the head of IT for a Fortune 500 company. What? I exclaimed, unable to hide my shock. But then, why are you cleaning offices? She finished for me. It's a long story, involving corporate politics, a whistleblowing incident, and a desire for a simpler life. But that's a tale for another time. I shook my head, still processing this revelation. Margaret, you might have just saved my job. I can't thank you enough. She waved off my gratitude. Don't thank me yet. You've still got a lot of work ahead of you. But now that you know what you're dealing with, you have a fighting chance. Energized by this breakthrough, I turned back to my computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. If I separate the data into subsets based on their formatting, then create individual conversion protocols for each. Now you're thinking, Margaret said approvingly. But don't forget to create a unification process for after the conversion. You'll need to standardize the data once it's in the new system. For the next few hours, Margaret and I worked side by side. She'd point out potential issues and I'd code solutions. It was exhilarating, like solving an intricate puzzle. As the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the office windows, we finally sat back, exhausted but triumphant. I think we've done it, I said, running the final test. The data flowed smoothly into the new system, perfectly formatted and unified. Margaret, you're a genius. She smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. No, Jake. I'm just someone who's been around the block a few times. You're the one who did all the hard work. As she stood to leave, a thought struck me. Wait, Margaret. Why did you help me? You could have just done your job and left. She paused at the entrance to my cubicle, considering her answer. Because 20 years ago, I was you. Young, ambitious, drowning in a project that seemed impossible. Nobody helped me then. I promised myself I'd do better if I ever had the chance. I felt a lump form in my throat. I don't know how to repay you. You can repay me by remembering this moment, she said softly. Someday you'll be in a position to help someone who's struggling. When that day comes, don't hesitate. With that, she was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a solved Henderson account. The office slowly came to life around me as employees began trickling in. I must have looked a sight, disheveled, unshaven, clearly having pulled an all-nighter, but I didn't care. I had done it. Or rather, we had done it. At precisely 9 a.m., Mr. Thompson strode into the office. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me. Jake, you're here early, he remarked, taking in my appearance. I stood up, trying to smooth down my rumpled shirt. Mr. Thompson, I have something to show you. Curiosity overtook his usual stern expression as he followed me to my desk. I pulled up the Henderson account data, now perfectly migrated and formatted in our new system. Is this? He trailed off, leaning in for a closer look. Yes, sir, I said, unable to keep the pride out of my voice. The Henderson account, fully migrated and operational. Mr. Thompson's jaw dropped. He turned to me, his eyes wide with disbelief, and was that respect? Jake, this is incredible, he said. How did you manage this overnight? I thought about Margaret, about her kindness and wisdom. Let's just say I had an unexpected ally, I replied with a smile. Mr. Thompson clapped me on the shoulder, his face breaking into a rare grin. Well done, Jake, truly well done. I'll call Henderson right away to give them the good news. As he hurried off to his office, I sank back into my chair, relief washing over me. My job was safe, at least for now. But more than that, I had learned a valuable lesson about perseverance, humility, and the unexpected ways help can come. I pulled out my phone, remembering Alex's text from yesterday. In all the chaos, I had completely forgotten about drinks and his cryptic message about needing to talk. "Sorry about last night," I typed. "Got caught up in work. Still need to talk?" His reply came almost instantly. "No worries. Yeah, we need to talk. It's important. Lunch today?" A new worry began to gnaw at me. What could be so important? But I pushed it aside. Whatever it was, I'd face it. After all, I'd just conquered the impossible. I could handle anything. "Sure," I replied. "Usual place at 1. "See you there," came Alex's response. As I set my phone down, I couldn't shake the feeling that my victory with the Henderson account was just the beginning. Something bigger was on the horizon. Whether good or bad, I couldn't say. But as I looked around the office at the world I thought I knew so well, I realized how much was hidden beneath the surface. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. "Someday you'll be in a position to help someone who's struggling. When that day comes, don't hesitate." Little did I know that day would come sooner than I ever expected, and it would change everything. The bustling diner was a stark contrast to the sterile office environment I'd left behind. The clatter of plates, the sizzle of the grill, and the hum of conversation filled the air as I pushed through the door, scanning the room for Alex. I spotted him in our usual booth, hunched over a cup of coffee. Even from a distance, I could tell something was off. His normally well-groomed appearance was disheveled, his hair unkempt and his shirt wrinkled. As I approached, I noticed the dark circles under his eyes. "Hey man," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You look like hell." Alex looked up, a weak smile flickering across his face. "Thanks. You're not exactly looking fresh yourself." I chuckled, running a hand through my own messy hair. "Yeah, well, I pulled an all-nighter at work." "What's your excuse?" The smile faded from Alex's face, replaced by a look of deep concern. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Jake, I'm in trouble. Big trouble." The seriousness in his tone sent a chill down my spine. "What kind of trouble?" Before Alex could answer, a waitress appeared at our table. "Can I get you boys anything?" "Just coffee for me," I said, not taking my eyes off Alex. "I'm good," Alex mumbled, gesturing to his half-empty cup. As soon as the waitress left, Alex leaned in again. "You remember that startup I've been working for? Technova?" I nodded. Alex had been raving about his new job for months, talking about revolutionary AI technology and the potential to change the world. "Well," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think they're involved in something illegal, maybe even dangerous." My eyebrows shot up. "What?" "Alex, that's a serious accusation. What makes you think that?" He glanced around nervously before continuing. "At first, everything seemed legit. We were developing AI for predictive analytics, nothing too out of the ordinary. But last week, I accidentally accessed some files I wasn't supposed to see." The waitress returned with my coffee. I thanked her absently, my attention fully on Alex. "What kind of files?" I asked once she was out of earshot. Alex's hands were shaking slightly as he spoke. "Blueprints, Jake. Weapons blueprints. And not just any weapons. We're talking about AI-controlled drones, autonomous tanks, things that could revolutionize warfare. But that's not even the worst part." I leaned in, my coffee forgotten. "What's the worst part?" "The client list," Alex said, his voice dropping even lower. "Jake, they're selling this technology to anyone who can pay. Governments, private military contractors, even groups that are on international watch lists." My mind was reeling. This sounded like something out of a spy thriller, not something that happened to regular guys like us. "Alex, are you sure about this? Maybe there's an explanation." "There's no explanation for this, Jake." Alex cut me off, his eyes blazing with a mix of fear and determination. "I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. Technova is profiting from conflict and potential war crimes. I sat back trying to process this information. So what are you going to do? Alex ran a hand through his hair, his expression torn. I don't know. I can't just sit by and do nothing. But if I go to the authorities, I could be implicating myself. Not to mention these people are dangerous. If they find out I know, he didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew the potential consequences. What about anonymous whistleblowing? I suggested. There must be ways to report this without putting yourself at risk. Alex shook his head. I've thought about that. But the evidence I have, it's all on the company's secure servers. I can't just copy it without leaving a trail. And even if I could, it's not enough to guarantee action. We need more. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what he was implying. Alex, what are you asking me to do? He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. Jake, you're the best coder I know. If anyone can get into those servers undetected, it's you. We could expose this, save lives. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Just hours ago, my biggest worry was a data migration project. Now, I was being asked to commit corporate espionage, possibly risking my life in the process. Alex, I don't know, I stammered. This is big, really big. We could go to jail, or worse. And if we do nothing, people could die, Alex countered. I know it's a lot to ask, but I didn't know who else to turn to. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. The face of Margaret, the night janitor who had helped me, flashed in my memory. Her words echoed in my ears. Someday, you'll be in a position to help someone who's struggling. When that day comes, don't hesitate. Was this that moment? Was this why Margaret had helped me, so I could be in a position to help Alex and potentially save lives? I opened my eyes, meeting Alex's desperate gaze. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm in. But we need a plan. We can't just go in blind. Relief washed over Alex's face. Thank you, Jake. I knew I could count on you. For the next hour, we huddled in that booth, speaking in hushed tones as we formulated a plan. Alex would get me access to the building as a new IT consultant. Once inside, I'd have to find a way to access the secure servers and extract the evidence without being detected. As we ironed out the details, a mix of excitement and terror coursed through my veins. This was so far beyond anything I'd ever done before, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was important, that lives were at stake. We'll do it Friday night, Alex said finally. Security is lighter on weekends and most of the staff will be gone. I nodded, trying to quell the butterflies in my stomach. Okay, Friday night it is. As we prepared to leave, Alex grabbed my arm. Jake, thank you. I know I'm asking a lot, and if you want to back out, I'll understand. I looked at my best friend, saw the weight of this secret bearing down on him, and knew I couldn't let him face this alone. We're in this together, Alex. No backing out. We parted ways outside the diner, each heading back to our respective jobs. But as I walked back to my office, everything looked different. The bustling city streets, the towering office buildings, they all seemed to hide secrets now. I thought about Margaret, about the Henderson account, about the twists and turns that had led me to this moment. I thought about the lives that might be at stake, and the risks we were about to take. As I rode the elevator back up to my floor, my mind was already racing, planning how I would approach this hacking challenge. It would be the most difficult, most dangerous thing I'd ever attempted. The doors opened, and I stepped out into the office. My coworkers milled about, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Mr. Thompson caught my eye from across the room and gave me a thumbs up, no doubt still pleased about the Henderson account. If only he knew what I was really planning for Friday night. I sat down at my desk, my completed work on the Henderson account still visible on the screen. It seemed trivial now in light of what was to come. I opened a new encrypted document and began to plan. As the office hummed with activity around me, I couldn't help but feel like I was straddling two worlds. In one, I was Jake the data analyst, the guy who had just saved a big account. In the other, I was Jake the hacker, preparing to infiltrate a dangerous company and expose their illegal activities. By Friday, these two worlds would collide, and nothing would ever be the same again. Friday night arrived with an oppressive weight of anticipation. The sun had long since set, casting the city in a blanket of darkness, punctuated by the artificial glow of streetlights and neon signs. I stood across the street from the Technova building, my heart pounding in my chest. The structure loomed before me, a gleaming monolith of glass and steel that seemed to touch the sky. During the day, it was just another office building, but tonight, it felt like a fortress I had to breach. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Alex's face flashed on the screen as I answered. "Jake, are you in position?" His voice was tense, barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. "Yeah, I'm here. Are you sure about this, Alex?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Alex spoke again, his voice was firm. "We have to do this, Jake. Remember what's at stake." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Right. Okay, I'm going in." "Good luck," Alex said. "I'll be monitoring the security feeds from here. If anything looks off, I'll warn you." The line went dead and I was alone again. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Then, with as much casual confidence as I could muster, I crossed the street and approached the building's main entrance. The security guard at the front desk looked up as I entered, his eyes narrowing slightly. I flashed the fake ID badge Alex had procured for me, praying it would pass scrutiny. "Evening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jake Thompson, IT consultant. I'm here for some late-night server maintenance." The guard checked his computer, then nodded. "Ah, yes. Mr. Reeves from RD authorized your access. Please sign in." I scribbled a signature on the log, my hand shaking slightly. The guard didn't seem to notice. "Elevators are to your right," he said, handing me a temporary access card. "You'll need this for after-hours access. Return it on your way out." I nodded my thanks and headed for the elevators, my heart racing. As soon as the doors closed behind me, I let out a shaky breath. First hurdle cleared, the elevator climbed swiftly to the 30th floor, where the main server room was located. As I stepped out, the emptiness of the office was eerie. My footsteps echoed in the silence as I made my way through the maze of cubicles. I found the server room easily enough. The access card the guard had given me beeped green and the door unlocked with a soft click. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me. The server room hummed with the sound of countless machines, blinking lights creating a surreal atmosphere. I pulled out my laptop and a series of cables, my hands moving almost on autopilot as I connected to the main server. "Okay," I muttered to myself. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." For the next hour, I was lost in a world of code. Firewalls fell before me, encryption unraveled at my fingertips. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. With each layer of security I bypassed, I felt a mix of pride in my skills and dread at what I might find. Finally, I broke through to the restricted files Alex had mentioned. My eyes widened as I scrolled through the data. Weapons designs, client lists, financial transactions. It was all here, and it was even worse than Alex had described. I was so engrossed in the files that I almost missed the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside. My blood ran cold as they stopped right outside the server room door. The handle jiggled, and then a voice called out, "Security, open up." Panic surged through me. I quickly initiated the file transfer to a secure cloud server, praying it would finish before I was discovered. "One moment," I called out, trying to buy time. "Just finishing up some maintenance." The voice on the other side of the door wasn't buying it. "Open this door now, or we're coming in." The file transfer was at 89%, 90%, 91%. I heard the beep of an access card and the door began to open. In a split-second decision, I yanked my laptop free, severing the connection just as the transfer hit 100%. Two security guards burst into the room, their flashlights blinding me. "Hands where we can see them," one of them barked. I raised my hands slowly, my laptop clutched in one of them. There's been a misunderstanding, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm an IT consultant here for... Save it, the other guard cut me off. We know you're not supposed to be here. The real Jake Thompson is currently in Hawaii on vacation. My heart sank. Our plan had been discovered. But how? As if in answer to my unspoken question, a new figure appeared in the doorway. My blood ran cold as I recognized him. It was Alex. Well done, gentlemen, Alex said, his voice devoid of the friendship and warmth I was used to. He turned to me, a cold smile on his face. Hello, Jake. Fancy meeting you here. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Alex, what's going on? Alex's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Oh, Jake, did you really think a lowly programmer like me would stumble upon such valuable information by accident? I've been working towards this moment for months. My mind reeled, struggling to process this turn of events. But the weapons, the illegal sales, all true, Alex nodded, but not the whole truth. You see, Jake, Technova isn't just selling weapons. We're revolutionizing warfare. And now, thanks to your exceptional hacking skills, we have proof that our security systems are vulnerable. The realization dawned on me with horrifying clarity. I hadn't been exposing Technova's illegal activities. I'd been an unwitting pawn in their security stress test. Why? I managed to choke out. Why involve me in this? Alex's expression softened slightly, almost regretful. Because you're the best, Jake. We needed someone with your skills to truly test our defenses, and we needed someone who believed they were doing the right thing. The moral imperative made you push harder, go further than a regular penetration tester would. I felt sick. Everything I thought I knew had been a lie. My best friend, the moral crusade, all of it, just an elaborate ruse. What happens now? I asked, dreading the answer. Alex straightened his tie. All business now. Now, you have a choice to make. You've proven your skills tonight, Jake. Skills that could be very valuable to Technova. Join us and you'll be part of something that will change the world. And if I refuse? The cold smile returned to Alex's face. Well, then we have evidence of you committing corporate espionage. I'm sure the authorities would be very interested in that. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the impossible choice before me. Everything I believed in, everything I thought I was fighting for, had been turned on its head. As I stood there, surrounded by security guards, betrayed by my best friend, I realized that this was just the beginning. Whatever choice I made now would set me on a path I could never turn back from. The hum of the servers seemed to grow louder, filling my ears with white noise. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. The moral certainty I'd felt earlier in the week had evaporated, leaving me adrift in a sea of ethical ambiguity. I opened my eyes, meeting Alex's expectant gaze. The choice loomed before me, a fork in the road of my life. As I prepared to answer, I couldn't help but wonder, in a world where nothing was as it seemed, where could I place my trust? And more importantly, could I ever trust myself again? The silence stretched on, heavy with anticipation. My future, and perhaps the future of warfare itself, hung in the balance. And I, Jake Thompson, former data analyst turned reluctant hacker, held the power to tip the scales. The server room felt like it was closing in on me, the hum of machinery a dull roar in my ears. Alex's expectant gaze bore into me, waiting for my decision. The security guard stood motionless, their presence a constant reminder of the gravity of my situation. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I need time to think, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex's eyebrow arched. Time isn't a luxury we have, Jake. The choice is simple. Join us or face the consequences. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. In that moment of darkness, a face flashed in my mind. Margaret, the night janitor who had helped me with the Henderson account. Her words echoed in my memory. Someday you'll be in a position to help someone who's struggling. When that day comes, don't hesitate. My eyes snapped open, a newfound resolve settling over me. No, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Alex blinked, clearly not expecting this response. No? Jake, think about what you're saying. We're offering you a chance to be part of something revolutionary. I shook my head. Revolutionary doesn't always mean right, Alex. What you're doing here, it's wrong. I won't be a part of it. A flicker of something, regret, disappointment, crossed Alex's face before his expression hardened. I'm sorry you feel that way, Jake. I truly am. He nodded to the security guards. Take him to holding. We'll let the authorities deal with him in the morning. As the guards moved towards me, a sudden calm washed over me. I had made my choice, and whatever came next, I would face it with a clear conscience. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Just as the guards reached for me, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The emergency lights kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. What the hell? One of the guards muttered. In the confusion, I acted on instinct. I ducked low, slipping past the guards and bolting for the door. I heard Alex shout behind me, but I didn't look back. I ran through the maze of cubicles, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached the elevator, jabbing the button frantically. To my horror, a red out-of-order light blinked back at me. The power outage must have affected the elevators. He's heading for the stairs. I heard Alex's voice echo through the office. With no other choice, I pushed through the door to the stairwell. 30 floors. It was going to be a long way down. I took the stairs 2 at a time, the sound of pursuit not far behind. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but fear and adrenaline kept me moving. As I reached the 15th floor, I heard a door slam open above me. Jake! Alex's voice reverberated in the stairwell. Stop this madness. You can't escape. I ignored him, pushing myself harder. 10 floors to go, then 5. My vision was starting to blur, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, I burst through the door to the ground floor. The lobby was dark, lit only by emergency lights. The security guard at the front desk was nowhere to be seen, probably investigating the power outage. I sprinted across the lobby, my freedom tantalizingly close. But as I reached for the front door, a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking my path. Going somewhere? I skidded to a halt, my heart sinking as I recognized the voice. It was Margaret, the night janitor who had helped me earlier in the week. But the kind, wise woman I had known was gone. In her place stood someone altogether different, confident, authoritative, dangerous. Margaret? I gasped, still trying to catch my breath. What are you doing here? A small smile played on her lips. Oh, Jake, did you really think our meeting was a coincidence? That I just happened to be there to help you with the Henderson account? The realization hit me like a physical blow. You're part of this too. Margaret nodded, her eyes glinting in the dim light. Technova values talent, Jake, in all its forms. Sometimes the best way to find that talent is to create opportunities for it to shine. My mind reeled. The Henderson account, the late-night breakthrough, Margaret's timely assistance. It had all been a test. A way to evaluate my skills and see how I performed under pressure. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why go to all this trouble? Because, Jake, Margaret said, her tone almost gentle, the world is changing. The future of warfare, of global power, is being shaped right here, right now. We need people like you, people with not just the skills but the moral fiber to make tough decisions. I shook my head, trying to clear it. But the weapons, the illegal sales, all part of a larger picture, Margaret explained. One that you're not seeing yet. The world isn't black and white, Jake. Sometimes to prevent greater evils, we must dabble in lesser ones. I heard footsteps behind me. Alex and the security guards had caught up. I was trapped. Margaret extended her hand. It's not too late, Jake. Join us. Be part of something greater than yourself. Help us shape the future. I looked at her outstretched hand, then back at her face. In that moment, I saw not just Margaret, but a glimpse of the vast, complex web I had stumbled into. A world of secrets, of moral ambiguities, of decisions that could shape the fate of nations. Time seemed to slow. I thought of my life before all this. The mundane job, the unfulfilled dreams of making a difference. I thought of the exhilaration I had felt hacking into Technova's servers, the rush of using my skills to their fullest potential. But I also thought of the weapons blueprints I had seen, the lists of clients that included names I recognized from news reports about conflict zones and human rights abuses. Could I really be part of that, no matter how noble the supposed end goal? In that moment of indecision, a new voice cut through the tension. Step away from him. Now. We all turned to see a group of people entering the lobby, led by a stern-faced woman in a suit. She held up a badge. FBI, nobody move. The lobby erupted into chaos. Security guards reached for their weapons, only to freeze as more FBI agents poured in, guns drawn. I stood rooted to the spot, my mind struggling to process this new development. The lead agent approached me. Jake Thompson? I nodded, still in shock. We need you to come with us, she said. You're in danger. Margaret's calm facade cracked. You don't understand what you're interfering with, she hissed at the agent. The agent's gaze was steel. Oh, I understand perfectly. Technova's little game ends now. As the FBI agents began to secure the scene, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Alex, his face a mask of desperation. Jake, he whispered urgently. Whatever you think you know, whatever they've told you, it's not the whole truth. We're not the bad guys here. I looked into the eyes of the man I had thought was my best friend, searching for any trace of the person I had known. Then who is Alex? Before he could answer, an agent pulled him away. As I was led out of the building, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who were the real villains in this story? What was the truth behind Technova's actions? And where did I fit into all of this? As I stepped into the cool night air, I realized that my journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The world I thought I knew had been turned upside down, and I was now adrift in a sea of uncertainty. But one thing was clear. I couldn't go back to my old life. Not after what I had seen, what I had learned. Whatever came next, whatever truths were yet to be uncovered, I knew I had to see this through to the end. The FBI agent guided me to a waiting car. As I slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The person staring back at me was changed, hardened by the events of the past few days. As the car pulled away from Technova's building, I couldn't help but wonder, what other secrets were lurking in the shadows of our world? And more importantly, was I ready to face them? The city lights blurred as we drove into the night, towards an uncertain future. But for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever lay ahead, I was no longer just a pawn in someone else's game. I was a player now, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The game had changed, and so had I. The real question was the world ready for what would come next? The fluorescent lights of the FBI field office buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the stark interrogation room. I sat at a metal table, my hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee. The events of the past few hours swirled in my mind like a surreal dream. The door opened, and the stern-faced woman who had led the raid on Technova entered. She sat across from me, placing a thick file on the table. Mr. Thompson, she began, her voice crisp and professional. I'm Special Agent Sarah Reeves. I know you've been through a lot tonight, but we need to debrief you on what happened at Technova. I nodded, my throat dry. I'll tell you everything I know, but honestly, I'm not sure I understand any of it myself. Agent Reeves leaned forward, her eyes intense. Start from the beginning. How did you get involved with Technova? I took a deep breath and began recounting the events of the past week. The Henderson account, Margaret's timely assistance, Alex's plea for help, and the disastrous infiltration attempt. As I spoke, Agent Reeves listened intently, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, she sat back, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Thompson, what you've stumbled into is much bigger than you realize. Technova isn't just a tech company dabbling in weapons development. They're at the center of a global conspiracy that threatens national security." My heart raced. What kind of conspiracy? Agent Reeves opened the file in front of her, pulling out several photographs. She laid them on the table, images of war-torn countries, advanced weaponry, and familiar faces from Technova. Technova has been developing AI-powered weapons and selling them to the highest bidder, including terrorist organizations and rogue states. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We believe they're working on something much more dangerous, a fully autonomous AI system capable of making military decisions without human intervention. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's insane. The potential for abuse, for things to go wrong. Exactly. Agent Reeves nodded grimly. Which is why we've been trying to infiltrate Technova for months, but their security is incredibly tight. Until you came along. I frowned, confused. Me? But I failed. I got caught. A small smile played on Agent Reeves's lips. Did you? Think back, Jake. What happened right before you were cornered in the server room? My mind raced back to that moment. The lights went out. The emergency systems kicked in. And in that confusion, you managed to transfer the files you'd accessed to a secure server. Agent Reeves finished. A server that we've been monitoring. Realization dawned on me. You caused the blackout? Agent Reeves nodded. We had an operative inside Technova. When we realized you were about to be caught, we initiated our contingency plan. The blackout gave you the opportunity to complete the transfer and attempt an escape. My head was spinning. But why didn't you just extract me then? Why let me go through all that? We needed to maintain our cover, Agent Reeves explained. If we had extracted you immediately, Technova would have known they had a leak. This way, they think their security test was successful, and our operative remains in place. I sat back, trying to process this new information. So what happens now? Agent Reeves's expression turned serious. That depends on you, Mr. Thompson. The information you've helped us obtain is crucial, but it's not enough. We need someone on the inside, someone with your skills, to help us bring Technova down. I stared at her, disbelief etched on my face. You want me to go back, after everything that's happened? I know it's a lot to ask, Agent Reeves said softly, but you're in a unique position. Technova thinks they've successfully recruited you. They'll be expecting you to show up for work on Monday, ready to join their team. I shook my head, overwhelmed. This is insane. I'm not a spy. I'm just a guy who's good with computers. Agent Reeves leaned forward, her eyes locking with mine. Sometimes, Jake, that's exactly what we need. Someone who isn't trained, someone who can think outside the box. Your skills, combined with your moral compass, make you the perfect candidate for this mission. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small room. And what if I say no? What if I just want to go back to my normal life? Agent Reeves's voice was gentle but firm. There is no going back, Jake. Technova knows who you are now. If you walk away, they'll assume you've turned on them. Your life will never be the same. I stopped pacing, leaning against the wall. The weight of the situation pressed down on me. Do I even have a choice? There's always a choice, Agent Reeves said. But sometimes the right choice is also the hardest one. I closed my eyes, thinking of Margaret's words about shaping the future, of Alex's desperation, of the weapons blueprints I'd seen. When I opened my eyes, I'd made my decision. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm in. What do you need me to do? Agent Reeves smiled, a mix of relief and determination on her face. First, we need to prep you. You'll be going back into Technova, but this time you'll be our eyes and ears on the inside. For the next several hours, Agent Reeves and her team briefed me on my mission. They taught me basic tradecraft, how to communicate securely, how to spot surveillance, how to maintain my cover. It was like cramming for the most intense exam of my life, except the stakes were infinitely higher. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the office windows, Agent Reeves handed me a small, inconspicuous device. "This is a secure communication device," she explained. "It looks like a normal smartphone, but it has military-grade encryption. Use it to contact us if you discover anything crucial or if you're in danger." I took the device, feeling its weight in my hand, the weight of responsibility, of the lives that could be affected by what I was about to do. "Remember, Jake," Agent Reeves said, her tone serious. "Trust no one inside Technova, not Alex, not Margaret, not anyone. Your life depends on maintaining your cover." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "What about my job, my apartment?" "As far as the world is concerned, you never left Technova last night," Agent Reeves explained. "We've created a paper trail showing you accepted their job offer. Your old company has been informed that you've taken a new position. As for your apartment, we'll have a team secure it and monitor it for any suspicious activity." The reality of what I was embarking on hit me full force. My entire life was being rewritten in the span of a night. As I prepared to leave the FBI office, Agent Reeves stopped me with a hand on my arm. "Jake," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it all night. "I know this is overwhelming, but what you're doing, it could save countless lives. Remember that when things get tough." I met her gaze, seeing the weight of similar decisions in her eyes. "I will," I promised. Stepping out of the FBI building into the early morning light, I felt like a different person. Jake Thompson, the data analyst, was gone. In his place stood Jake Thompson, reluctant spy, carrying the fate of who knows how many lives on his shoulders. As I hailed a cab to take me to my apartment, to pack for a job I never thought I'd have, I couldn't help but think about the twists and turns that had led me here. A week ago, my biggest concern was a data migration project. Now I was at the center of a global conspiracy, playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse with forces I barely understood. The cab pulled away from the curb, merging into the early morning traffic. As the city came to life around me, I steeled myself for what was to come. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. The game was on, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The real test of my skills, my courage, and my convictions was yet to come. As the cab wound its way through the city streets, I found myself wondering, in this world of shadows and secrets, who could I really trust? And more importantly, could I trust myself to see this through to the end, no matter the cost? The answers to these questions, I realized, would shape not just my future, but potentially the future of the world. With that sobering thought, I watched the familiar sights of my old life slip away, replaced by the unknown challenges of my new reality. The next chapter of my life was about to begin, and I was stepping into it blindly, armed with nothing but my wits and a desperate hope that I was doing the right thing. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into the lion's den. But sometimes, I reminded myself, that's exactly where you need to be to make a difference. Monday morning arrived with an air of surreal normalcy. I stood outside the Technova building, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of my new secure phone heavy in my pocket. The glass and steel structure loomed before me, no longer just an office building, but a fortress of secrets I was tasked to infiltrate. Taking a deep breath, I pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was bustling with activity, employees streaming in for another work week. None of them knew the danger that lurked within these walls, the global conspiracy that was unfolding right under their noses. "Jake," a familiar voice called out. I turned to see Alex approaching, a broad smile on his face. It was jarring to see him act so casual after the events of Friday night. "Glad to see you made the right choice, man. Ready for your first day?" I forced a smile, remembering Agent Reeves's warning. Trust no one. "Yeah, excited to get started," I replied, hoping my voice didn't betray my nerves. Alex clapped me on the shoulder, leading me to the elevators. "Great. We've got you set up in the RD department. I think you're going to love what we're working on." As we rode up to the 25th floor, Alex chatted animatedly about projects and colleagues. I nodded along, my mind racing to memorize names and details that might be important later. The RD floor was a hive of activity. Whiteboard-lined walls were covered in complex equations and diagrams. Developers huddled around computer screens, engaged in intense discussions. It looked like any other tech company, but I knew the sinister undercurrents that ran beneath the surface. Alex led me to a sleek workstation. "This is you," he said, gesturing to the state-of-the-art computer setup. "We'll start you off with some basic system familiarization, then dive into the real work." I sat down, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was it. I was in. I was. The morning passed in a blur of orientation meetings and system tutorials. By lunchtime, my head was spinning with information, some of it mundane office procedures, some of it hinting at the advanced weapon systems I knew Technova was developing. As I sat in the cafeteria, picking at a salad I couldn't taste, Margaret slid into the seat across from me. Her eyes twinkled with the same mysterious knowledge I'd seen on Friday night. "So, Jake," she said, her voice low, "how are you finding your first day?" I met her gaze, forcing myself to remain calm. "It's overwhelming. There's so much to take in." Margaret nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "That's natural, but I have a feeling you'll adapt quickly. You have a unique perspective that will be valuable here." The double meaning in her words wasn't lost on me. I wondered how much she knew about my attempted escape, about the FBI's intervention. I had to tread carefully. "I'm looking forward to the challenge," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Margaret leaned in, her voice dropping even lower. "Good, because we have big plans for you, Jake. Very big plans indeed." Before I could respond, she stood up and walked away, leaving me with a chill running down my spine. What kind of plans? And how deep did this conspiracy really go? The afternoon brought my first real taste of the work Technova was doing. Alex introduced me to a project codenamed Prometheus, an AI system designed to analyze global conflicts and suggest military strategies. As Alex walked me through the system's capabilities, my blood ran cold. This wasn't just theoretical. The AI was actively processing real-world data, making recommendations that could affect millions of lives. "Impressive, isn't it?" Alex said, mistaking my horror for awe. "Imagine a world where war is conducted with surgical precision, minimizing collateral damage and civilian casualties." I swallowed hard, finding my voice. But who decides how it's used? Who's accountable if something goes wrong? Alex's expression darkened slightly. "That's above our pay grade, Jake. We build the tools. How they're used, well, that's for others to decide." As the day wore on, I found moments to discreetly examine files, to probe a little deeper into Technova's systems. Each discovery was more chilling than the last. Weapons that could think for themselves, surveillance systems that could track anyone anywhere, AI that could predict and manipulate global events. By the time 6 p.m. rolled around, I felt like I was drowning in information. As I prepared to leave, Alex approached my desk. "Hey, a bunch of us are going for drinks to welcome you to the team. You in?" I hesitated, torn between maintaining my cover and the desperate need to process everything I'd learned. "Thanks, but I'm pretty wiped. Rain check?" Alex nodded, though I caught a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Sure thing. Get some rest. Tomorrow we dive into the real work." I managed to keep my composure until I was out of the building. Once on the street, I ducked into a nearby alley, my hands shaking as I pulled out the secure phone. I dialed the emergency contact number Agent Reeves had given me. "This is Reeves." Her voice came through, tense and alert. "It's Jake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We have a problem. It's worse than we thought. Much worse." "Tell me everything," she commanded. For the next 10 minutes I relayed what I'd discovered. The scope of the Prometheus project, the advanced weapon systems, the global reach of Technova's influence. When I finished, there was a long pause. "This is significant," Agent Reeves finally said. "You've done well, Jake, but we need more. Concrete evidence we can use to shut them down." "I'll keep digging," I promised. "But I don't know how long I can keep this up. They're watching me closely." "Be careful," Agent Reeves warned. "If they suspect anything, your life will be in danger. Remember your training. Trust no one." As I ended the call and stepped back onto the busy street, those words echoed in my mind. Trust no one. But in a world where nothing was as it seemed, where loyalties shifted like sand, how could I be sure I was on the right side? I made my way home, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The enormity of what I'd undertaken was starting to sink in. I wasn't just playing at being a spy. I was in the middle of a real dangerous game with global stakes. As I entered my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every sound a possible intruder. This, I realized, was my new reality. I barely slept that night, my dreams haunted by images of AI-controlled weapons and global conflicts manipulated by unseen hands. When my alarm went off the next morning, I felt like I hadn't rested at all. As I prepared for another day at Technova, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back at me was changed, older, harder, marked by the weight of secrets and responsibility. I hardly recognized myself. But as I straightened my tie and steeled myself for the day ahead, I knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. I was in this now, for better or worse. The fate of countless lives could depend on what I discovered, on the choices I made. With that sobering thought, I left my apartment and stepped into the bright morning sun. Another day in the lion's den awaited, and I had to be ready for whatever it might bring. The game was far from over, and the stakes were only getting higher. As I walked towards the Technova building, blending in with the crowd of morning commuters, I couldn't help but wonder. In this world of shadows and secrets, of shifting allegiances and hidden agendas, who was really pulling the strings? And more importantly, was I truly prepared for what I might uncover? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The Jake Thompson who walked into Technova that morning was not the same man who had started this journey. I was changing, adapting, becoming something I never thought I'd be. The question was, would I be able to hold on to my humanity in the process? With a deep breath, I swiped my access card and entered the building. Another day in the world of high-stakes espionage and global conspiracies was about to begin, and I had to be ready for anything. 2 weeks had passed since my first day at Technova, and I was starting to settle into a routine. A dangerous, nerve-wracking routine, but a routine nonetheless. Each day I delved deeper into the company's projects, uncovering layers of secrets that both fascinated and terrified me. On this particular morning, I found myself in a high-level briefing about Project Prometheus. The conference room was filled with Technova's top brass, including Alex and Margaret. I sat quietly, my tablet in hand, ostensibly taking notes, but in reality, recording every word with the hidden function Agent Reeves had shown me how to use. Dr. Evelyn Chen, the lead scientist on Prometheus, stood at the front of the room, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've achieved a significant breakthrough. Prometheus is now capable of not just analyzing conflicts, but predicting them with 93% accuracy." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the room. I felt my heart rate quicken. This was big. "Imagine," Dr. Chen continued, "being able to anticipate geopolitical crises before they occur, to position our clients' assets strategically before a single shot is fired." Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "And what about influencing these conflicts, Evelyn? Can Prometheus do that?" The room fell silent. Dr. Chen's smile widened. I'm glad you asked, Margaret. Our latest simulations suggest that with careful manipulation of key factors, economic pressures, social media narratives, strategic military movements, we can not only predict conflicts, but shape their outcomes. The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. Technova wasn't just profiting from war, they were manufacturing it. Alex caught my eye from across the table, mistaking my horror for awe. He gave me a subtle nod as if to say, "See what you're part of now." As the meeting concluded, I made my way back to my workstation, my mind reeling. I had to get this information to Agent Reeves immediately. But before I could reach for my secure phone, Alex appeared at my side. "Jake, got a minute?" His tone was casual, but there was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite place. "Sure," I replied, forcing a smile. "What's up?" Alex led me to a quiet corner of the office. "Listen, we're impressed with your work so far. The higher-ups think you're ready for more sensitive projects." I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh? What kind of projects?" Alex glanced around before continuing in a low voice. "We're expanding Prometheus's capabilities. Not just predicting and influencing conflicts, but actively managing them. We need someone with your skills to help develop the interface." My mouth went dry. "The interface?" "Yeah." Alex nodded, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that unnerved me. "Imagine a system that could deploy autonomous weapons, redirect resources, even manipulate global markets, all in real time, guided by Prometheus's predictions. We're talking about the power to shape the world, Jake." I fought to keep my expression neutral, even as my mind raced with the implications. This wasn't just unethical, it was apocalyptic. "Sounds ambitious," I managed. Alex clapped me on the shoulder. "It's more than ambitious, Jake. It's the future, and you're going to help build it. Margaret wants to see you in her office at 3 p.m. to discuss the details." As Alex walked away, I slumped into my chair, my heart pounding. This was it, the smoking gun we needed to bring Technova down. But getting this information out wasn't going to be easy. I waited until lunchtime before making my move. Under the guise of taking a personal call, I slipped out of the building and found a secluded spot in a nearby park. With shaking hands, I pulled out my secure phone and dialed Agent Reeves. "Talk to me, Jake," she answered on the first ring. I spoke quickly, relaying everything I'd learned about Prometheus and the new interface project. "This is big, Agent Reeves. If they succeed, Technova will have the power to start or stop wars at will. They could reshape the entire global order." There was a long pause on the other end. When Agent Reeves spoke again, her voice was tight with tension. "This is worse than we imagined. Jake, we need hard evidence. Documents, code samples, anything you can get your hands on." "I'm working on it," I assured her. "They're bringing me into the inner circle. I might be able to access the core systems soon." "Be careful," Agent Reeves warned. "The deeper you go, the more dangerous this becomes. If they suspect you—" "I know," I cut her off. "I'll be careful." As I ended the call and made my way back to the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The weight of what I was doing pressed down on me, making each step feel like I was wading through molasses. The afternoon dragged on, each minute ticking by with agonizing slowness. Until finally, it was time for my meeting with Margaret. I knocked on her office door, my heart in my throat. "Come in, Jake," her voice called out. I entered to find Margaret sitting behind her desk, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp and calculating. "Have a seat," she gestured to the chair across from her. As I sat down, Margaret leaned forward, fixing me with an intense gaze. "Jake, I'm going to be direct. We believe you have the potential to be a key player in Technova's future. But before we bring you fully into the fold, we need to be certain of your commitment." I met her gaze, forcing myself to remain calm. "I'm committed to the work we're doing here, Margaret. It's revolutionary." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Revolutionary, yes, but also controversial. What we're doing here will change the world, Jake. Not everyone will understand that. Some might even try to stop us. Are you prepared to do whatever it takes to see our vision realized? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with unspoken implications. I knew my answer could make or break my cover. I understand the stakes, I said carefully. I'm ready to do what's necessary. Margaret nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good, because we have a task for you, Jake. A test, if you will. She slid a file across the desk. I opened it to find a dossier on a man I didn't recognize. This is Dr. Adrian Foster, Margaret explained. He's a former Technova employee who's threatening to go public with some of our more sensitive projects. We need you to neutralize this threat. My blood ran cold. Neutralize? What exactly do you mean? Margaret's eyes hardened. I think you know exactly what I mean, Jake. Dr. Foster has a gambling problem and a weak heart. It wouldn't be difficult to arrange an unfortunate incident. I stared at the file, my mind racing. This was it, the moment where I either committed fully to my cover or blew the whole operation. The fate of Dr. Foster, and possibly the entire mission, rested on my next words. I understand, I heard myself say, even as my conscience screamed in protest. When do you need this done? Margaret's smile was cold and satisfied. By the end of the week. Alex will provide you with the necessary resources. Don't disappoint us, Jake. As I left Margaret's office, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. I had just agreed to essentially assassinate a man, a line I never thought I'd cross, even in pretense. But if I refused, my cover would be blown, and all hope of stopping Technova would be lost. I made my way back to my desk in a daze, the weight of what I'd just committed to pressing down on me like a physical force. As I sat down, I caught sight of my reflection in the computer screen. The face staring back at me was that of a stranger, a man caught between two worlds, teetering on the edge of an abyss. I knew I had to contact Agent Reeves immediately, but how could I explain this? How could I ask for guidance on whether to go through with a murder to maintain my cover? And even if I didn't do it, how could I stop Technova from eliminating Dr. Foster through other means? As the reality of my situation sank in, I realized that I had crossed a threshold. There was no going back now. I was in deeper than I ever imagined, playing a game where the stakes were life and death. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the office. As my colleagues packed up and headed home, I remained at my desk staring at the file Margaret had given me. The face of Dr. Adrian Foster looked back at me, unaware that his fate now rested in my hands. In that moment, I understood the true cost of the path I had chosen. It wasn't just about uncovering secrets or playing spy. It was about making impossible choices, about walking the razor's edge between right and wrong. As I finally gathered my things and prepared to leave, one question echoed in my mind. In my quest to stop Technova from playing God, had I inadvertently cast myself in that role? And if so, was I prepared for the consequences? The elevator doors closed behind me, and I descended into the gathering darkness, carrying the weight of my decisions and the lives they would affect with me. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Dr. Adrian Foster's file sat on my bedside table, a constant reminder of the impossible choice I faced. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard the unspoken plea for life in his frozen photograph. On Thursday morning, I arrived at Technova earlier than usual, my mind made up. I couldn't go through with it. I wouldn't become a murderer, even to maintain my cover. But I also couldn't let Technova eliminate Dr. Foster. I had to find another way. As I settled at my desk, Alex appeared, his face uncharacteristically serious. "Conference room C now," he said in a low voice. "It's about the Foster situation." My heart raced as I followed him. Had they discovered my reluctance? Was my cover already blown? The conference room was dimly lit, occupied only by Margaret and a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with graying hair and cold, calculating eyes that seemed to bore right through me. Margaret gestured for me to sit. "Jake, this is Mr. Blackwood. He's here to assist with your assignment." Blackwood's lips curled into what might have been a smile, but it never reached his eyes. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice smooth as silk but with an undercurrent of danger, "I understand you're having some reservations about your task." I felt a chill run down my spine. How did they know? I'm not sure what you mean," I stammered, trying to maintain my composure. Blackwood leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Let's not play games, Jake. We've been monitoring your activities, your sleepless nights, your hesitation. It's understandable. Taking a life is no small matter." My mind raced. They'd been watching me that closely? What else did they know? Margaret spoke up, her tone gentle but firm. "Jake, we don't ask this of you lightly, but Dr. Foster poses a significant threat to everything we're working towards. Sometimes, sacrifices must be made for the greater good." I swallowed hard, knowing I was walking a dangerous line. "I understand the stakes," I said carefully. "But surely there's another way. Couldn't we discredit him somehow, instead of eliminating him?" Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Discredit him? And risk him finding sympathetic ears? No, Jake. This threat must be permanently neutralized." I felt trapped, cornered. But then, an idea struck me. A dangerous, potentially disastrous idea, but one that might save both my cover and Dr. Foster's life. "What if," I began, choosing my words carefully, "what if we could turn him? Bring him back into the fold?" The room fell silent. Margaret and Blackwood exchanged glances. "Explain," Blackwood demanded. I took a deep breath. "Dr. Foster knows our systems, our projects. He's a valuable asset. If we could convince him to return, to see the importance of what we're doing, wouldn't that be more beneficial than eliminating him?" Margaret leaned back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "It's an interesting proposition. But how would you propose to accomplish this?" This was it, the moment of truth. "Let me meet with him," I said, injecting confidence into my voice. "I'll explain the full scope of Prometheus, show him how close we are to changing the world, appeal to his scientific curiosity, his desire to be part of something revolutionary." Blackwood scoffed. "And if he refuses?" I met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll do what needs to be done. But give me this chance first." The tension in the room was palpable as Margaret and Blackwood considered my proposal. Finally, Margaret nodded. "Very well, Jake. You have 48 hours. Bring Dr. Foster back into the fold or eliminate him. There is no third option." "Understood?" I nodded, relief and anxiety warring within me. "Understood." As I left the conference room, Alex fell into step beside me. "That was a bold move in there," he murmured. "I hope you know what you're doing." I gave him a tight smile. "So do I." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of preparation. I was given Dr. Foster's current location, a small town on the outskirts of the city. As I left the office that evening, the weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me. I spent the night in a cheap motel near Foster's location, poring over his file, trying to find an angle, a way to convince him to come back without revealing my true intentions. As dawn broke, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. Dr. Foster's hideout turned out to be a rundown apartment complex. I found his unit and knocked, my heart pounding. The door opened a crack, revealing a haggard face that barely resembled the photograph in the file. "Who are you?" Foster demanded, his voice hoarse. "Dr. Foster, my name is Jake Thompson. I'm from Technova. We need to talk." Foster's eyes widened in fear. He tried to slam the door, but I wedged my foot in the gap. "Please," I said urgently, "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm trying to save your life. Something in my tone must have convinced him. He hesitated, then opened the door wider. You have 5 minutes. I stepped inside, taking in the cluttered apartment, the evidence of a life lived in fear. Dr. Foster, Technova sent me to deal with you. But I think there's a better way. Foster laughed bitterly. Deal with me? You mean kill me? That's how Technova handles its problems, isn't it? I nodded grimly. Usually, yes. But I've convinced them to give you another chance. To come back, to be part of Prometheus again. Foster's eyes narrowed. Why would I ever go back to that hellhole? Do you have any idea what they're planning to do with Prometheus? I do, I said quietly. And that's why I need your help. Foster stared at me, confusion evident on his face. My help? What are you talking about? I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. I was about to take an enormous risk, but I saw no other way. Dr. Foster, I'm not really working for Technova. I'm an undercover agent trying to bring them down, but I need your help to do it. The silence that followed was deafening. Foster's face cycled through a range of emotions: disbelief, hope, fear. How do I know I can trust you? He finally asked. I pulled out my secure phone, quickly dialing Agent Reeves. When she answered, I put the call on speaker. Agent Reeves, I'm with Dr. Foster. We need to bring him in. There was a pause, then Reeves' voice came through, tense but controlled. Understood. Is the location secure? Foster's eyes widened as he realized I was telling the truth. It is, he said, his voice shaky. Good, Reeves replied. Stay put. I'm sending an extraction team to your location. They'll be there in 20 minutes. As I ended the call, Foster slumped into a chair, his face pale. I can't believe it, he muttered. All this time, I thought I was alone. I sat across from him, my voice urgent. Dr. Foster, I need you to listen carefully. When the extraction team arrives, they're going to take you to a safe location, but I need to return to Technova. Foster looked up sharply. You're going back? But why? Because the job's not done, I explained. We need more evidence to bring Technova down for good, and I'm in a position to get it. Understanding dawned in Foster's eyes. You're going to tell them you convinced me to come back. I nodded. It's the only way to maintain my cover. But I need you to tell Agent Reeves everything you know about Prometheus, about Technova's plans. Can you do that? Foster straightened, a spark of determination in his eyes. I can do better than that. I have files, data I managed to smuggle out before I left. It's not enough on its own, but combined with what you can get, it might be enough to bring them down, I finished. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Foster gathered his hidden files, and I briefed him on what to tell the extraction team. When we heard the knock on the door, signaling the team's arrival, Foster turned to me one last time. Thank you, he said simply, for saving my life, and for giving me a chance to make things right. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on my shoulders. Stay safe, Dr. Foster. With luck, this will all be over soon. As the extraction team whisked Foster away, I stood alone in the empty apartment, steeling myself for what was to come. I had just taken an enormous risk, one that could blow my cover wide open if anything went wrong. But as I prepared to return to Technova, to dive even deeper into the lion's den, I felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time since this mission began, I felt like we had a real chance of succeeding. I stepped out into the morning sun, my resolve strengthened. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than ever, but I was no longer just playing defense. It was time to take the fight to Technova. As I hailed a cab to take me back to the city, back to the heart of the conspiracy I was working to unravel, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises lay in store. And more importantly, would I be ready for them? The cab pulled away from the curb, carrying me towards an uncertain future. But one thing was certain: there was no turning back now. The final act of this dangerous game was about to begin, and I was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The Technova building loomed before me, its gleaming facade now a symbol of the darkness that lurked within. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The story I was about to tell could make or break everything. As I stepped into the elevator, my secure phone buzzed. A message from Agent Reeves. Foster secure. Proceed with caution. Those 4 words carried the weight of everything we'd risked. Dr. Foster was safe, but now it was up to me to sell the lie and push forward with our plan. The elevator doors opened and I stepped out onto the executive floor. Margaret's assistant waved me through without a word. Clearly, they were expecting me. I found Margaret in her office along with Alex and Mr. Blackwood. The tension in the room was palpable. "Well?" Margaret asked, her eyes boring into me. I took a seat, forcing my face into a mask of confidence. "It's done. Dr. Foster has agreed to return." The reaction was immediate. Phew. Alex's eyebrows shot up in surprise while Blackwood's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Explain," Blackwood demanded. I leaned forward, launching into the story I'd carefully crafted. I approached Foster as we discussed. At first he was resistant, afraid, but when I laid out the full scope of Prometheus, the potential impact on global affairs, I could see the spark of scientific curiosity in his eyes. Margaret nodded slowly. "Go on." I appealed to his ego, I continued. Reminded him that he was instrumental in the early stages of Prometheus, that without him, we might never achieve its full potential. I painted a picture of a world shaped by his vision, his work. Alex whistled low. "And that worked?" I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Scientists like Foster, they're driven by the desire to make a mark on the world. I simply showed him that Technova was his best chance to do that. Blackwood still looked skeptical. "And you're certain he's not playing you? That this isn't some ploy to gather evidence against us?" My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm certain, but don't take my word for it. I suggested Foster provide some of his recent work as a gesture of good faith. He agreed. It should be arriving securely later today." This was the riskiest part of my plan. The files Foster had given me before his extraction were real, his work on Prometheus from before he left Technova. But they were carefully selected to not reveal anything too damaging, while still being valuable enough to be believable. Margaret leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. "Impressive work, Jake. I must admit, I had my doubts about your resolve. But you've exceeded expectations." I allowed myself a modest nod. "Thank you. I believe in what we're doing here. Sometimes that means making hard choices." Blackwood still didn't look entirely convinced, but he seemed to relax slightly. "When can we expect Foster to return?" "I've arranged for him to come in tomorrow," I lied smoothly. "He needed a day to get his affairs in order." Margaret nodded. "Excellent. Alex, prepare a full briefing on our current progress with Prometheus. We'll want to bring Foster up to speed quickly." As the meeting adjourned, I felt a mix of relief and heightened anxiety. I'd bought myself some time, but the stakes had never been higher. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. I threw myself into my work on Prometheus, all too aware of the eyes watching me. Every move I made felt scrutinized, every conversation potentially loaded. As evening fell, I found myself alone in my office poring over lines of code. The core of Prometheus lay before me, the algorithms that could predict and manipulate global conflicts. It was terrifying in its elegance, in its potential for destruction. A knock at my door startled me. I looked up to see Alex leaning against the doorframe. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. I nodded, forcing a tired smile. "Just want to make sure everything's perfect for Foster's return tomorrow." Alex stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "You know, Jake," he said, his voice low, "I've been thinking about your conversation with Foster. It's impressive how quickly you were able to turn him." I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Sometimes people just need the right motivation. Alex's eyes narrowed. "True, but it got me wondering, what's your motivation, Jake? Why are you really here?" My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. Had my cover been blown? I leaned back in my chair, buying time to compose myself. "What do you mean, Alex?" "I'm here because I believe in what we're doing, in shaping the future." Alex moved closer, his gaze intense. "Are you? Because sometimes I wonder. The way you look at the Prometheus data, the questions you ask, it's almost like you're searching for something." I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move and everything would come crashing down. But then an idea struck me. A dangerous one, but possibly my only way out. I sighed heavily, letting my shoulders slump. "You're right, Alex. I am searching for something." Alex's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Oh?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "The truth is, I'm not just here for Technova. I'm working for someone else, someone who's very interested in Prometheus." Alex's hand moved towards his pocket, where I knew he kept his phone, probably to alert security. I had to move fast. "Wait," I said urgently. "Before you do anything, hear me out. The people I'm working for, they're not enemies of Technova. They're potential allies, very powerful allies." Alex's hand stilled, curiosity warring with suspicion on his face. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, launching into the biggest lie of my life. "There's a group, Alex. High-level government officials, military leaders, titans of industry. They've been watching Technova, watching Prometheus. They see its potential and they want in." "Why haven't they approached us directly?" Alex asked, still skeptical but clearly intrigued. "Plausible deniability," I explained. "If Prometheus ever came to light, they needed to be able to distance themselves. So they sent me to evaluate, to report back." Alex's eyes widened as he began to grasp the implications. "And what have you reported?" I allowed a small smile to play on my lips. "That Prometheus is everything they hoped it would be, and more. With their backing, their resources. Alex, we could take Prometheus global. Shape not just conflicts, but the entire world order." For a long moment, Alex was silent, processing what I'd said. I held my breath, knowing that everything hinged on this moment. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Does Margaret know?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I needed to be sure first, to see Prometheus in action, to understand its full potential." Alex ran a hand through his hair, his mind clearly racing. This is big, Jake. If what you're saying is true, it could change everything." I finished for him. "But Alex, I need to know. Can I trust you with this? Are you with me?" Another long pause. I could almost see the wheels turning in Alex's head, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Then slowly, he nodded. "I'm with you, Jake. What's our next move?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "For now, we proceed as normal. Let Foster's return play out. But start thinking about how we can expand Prometheus. Dream big, Alex. The sky's the limit now." As Alex left my office, his mind clearly buzzing with possibilities, I slumped in my chair. I'd just taken an enormous gamble, one that could either save my mission or doom it entirely. I pulled out my secure phone, sending a coded message to Agent Reeves. "Storm clouds gathering. Lightning may strike soon." As I stared out the window at the city lights below, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice. The next few days would determine everything. The fate of Prometheus, of Technova, and possibly of the world itself. I had set in motion events that I couldn't fully control. Now all I could do was ride the wave and hope I could steer it in the right direction. As I gathered my things to leave, my gaze fell on the Prometheus code still glowing on my screen. The power to shape the world, for good or ill, lay within those lines of text. And I, Jake Thompson, erstwhile data analyst turned reluctant spy, held the key. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders as I stepped into the cool night air. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. The final act of this dangerous game was about to begin, and I had to be ready for anything.